Why Instruct? It's technical ready. It's ready for more folks. It's ready for developers, for operators, for people who need to see and believe the code. It's feature ready. That means it has all the features I need for tracking if my customers are happy, for tracking what their progress is, and if it actually works for them.
We use Instruct, for our sales-led and product-led growth strategies at HashiCorp, and the ability for us to, have more of a self-service type of approach where it makes sense for people, accessing these types of sandboxes.
Welcome back to the Developer Marketing Summit. We're about to join another amazing talk, but just before we do, I want to say a huge thank you to our sponsors, speakers, and you, our wonderful audience, for making this event possible. With expert presentations and inspirational discussions on the agenda, you are in for a real treat today. Please ensure you are sharing your feedback and asking questions in the comment section of the video, as our speakers will be answering them throughout their session. After the event, a great place to continue the conversation is in the new Developer Marketing Alliance Slack community. I'll be posting the sign up link regularly in the comments, so if you're not already involved, keep your eyes peeled and join the discussion. And remember, you can gain on-demand access to all of our exclusive event footage with a PMA Pro membership or Access All Areas pass. So with all of this in mind, let's dive back in.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Developer Marketing Summit. I am excited to be here. My name is JD Prater, and I'm going to be walking you through 5 strategies to include in your developer go-to-market playbook. As I mentioned, I am JD. I was the first product marketer at Quora. I went on to be a product marketer at Google Fiber and then again at AWS. And currently, I'm the head of marketing at Osmos. You can also find me hosting the Thrills and Chills podcast, where we dive into the highs and lows of establishing product marketing and being the first product marketer. But you guys are here to learn about developer marketing. And too many times I see this, where we come in and we see, I got this cool idea, I got this new type of tea, and it's so much focused on the product, where really it should be this audience first, and really focusing on the segment of customers. Now, how do we get there? How do we focus on this specific audience with our go-to-market? Well, we're going to be walking through this and answering a few questions in today's session. So in today's session, we're going to be walking through how to define markets. How do you create audience segments? How do you evaluate those target segments? How do you win? And then how do you create that mix, that marketing mix? So let's dive in. Number 1, for your go-to-market playbook, how do you define and segment the market? Because there is no single type of developer. There can be a world of difference between someone who's like working at a tech company like Google or Netflix, and someone who works at an early stage startup like myself, and then someone who might be at an insurance company. There's no single type. Just look at all of the words that we can use to even describe what a developer is doing. Software, data, SaaS, algorithms, right? There's a lot going on. And so let's walk through the STP framework: segmentation, targeting, positioning, for our go-to-market strategy. So let's get started with the segmentation. How do we create meaningfully different customer groups? Let's get started by breaking it down and defining what our market is. So you may have heard these terms: TAM, SAM, SUM. TAM, what is your total available market? How big is this thing? Your SAM, what's your serviceable available market? What portion of that fits you and your product. And then lastly, serviceable. This is where you are going to be able to obtain that market. What portion of the SAM can you reach? And that's really important. Let's take a quick look at an example to help make this make more sense. This is from Airbnb's first pitch deck. So they said, look, there's roughly $2 billion in trips booked worldwide. But we're going to focus on people who are looking for budget and online trips. That's 532 million trips booked with Airbnb. This is our market share, roughly $10.6 million. So this is really important. They were able to break it down, saying trips booked, but look right there. They focused on budget and online trips. Important. Now trips booked with them. So what you can really see is they really focused on this minimal viable audience. Minimum, it's too small if you just focus on the minimum. Viable, too broad. Where you find that intersection, thanks to Seth Godin, is the smallest possible audience that you can serve, and this is key, that can sustain your business. This is really important because once you actually focus on delighting the minimal viable audience, two things will happen, and you'll discover it's a lot larger group than you expected. And then two, they start telling others. On the other hand, if you just shoot for the mass, this is another word for like average, you're probably going to create something average, which isn't going to get you very far. So we got to break it down and find this minimal viable audience. And to do that, we're going to segment the market into subgroups. So market segmentation, this is all about that process of dividing the market into subgroups. These can be based on characteristics such as like age, behaviors, income levels. And this process will help you understand what your key customers want, where they are, how to talk to them effectively. So let's take a look at what a potentially could look like for you. Devs, this is from the Stack Overflow 2021 developer survey. So they said, which of the following describes your current job? Please select all that apply. These are developers describing their own job, and look how long this list is. So let's zoom in here. Maybe it's like on the top 10. And we can see full stack, backend, front end. Then we've got desktop, mobile, DevOps, systems admin, database admin. These are all different types of developers. And you're going to start segmenting and figuring out where does your product fit? Who is it for? And then really focus in on those markets. So let's look at some other ways that we can break this down. Here it is for professional developers. How old are they? We could then break it down and say, hey, we want to target these age range. We could look at our competition. Who is our competition focused on? And we're going to start listing those things. Here's our company. Here's competitor 1, competitor 2, competitor 3, and we're going to just list it: age, gender, occupation, income, country, values, lifestyle, and so on. But what you're going to start to find is there will be some differences. And that's what's going to be key too, so that you can focus on when we get to that positioning to win. From here, let's start breaking down our segmentation mix. Maybe you want to focus on CTOs. There's software developers. You maybe want to focus on infrastructure, ops, security developers. These are all different ways to break down that developer. Maybe it's kind of under what org do they live under? And we're going to break it down and understand how do they consume media? What are their hashtags? We're going to start to understand more about them. This is very similar to those personas that we're all used to creating, but think of this as market and now subgroups. Maybe you want to break it down by full stack. Remember we talked about that Stack Overflow. Full stack engineers, front end engineers, back end, mobile, DevOps. At the end, you'll get something similar to this. Maybe it's your ideal audience segment is one that is both large and still growing. So key, remember, it has to be able to support your business, and you're able to reach them with your marketing efforts. You want to align that segment with your business strategy. So from here, once we align it, we can now say, okay, cool. Now we're going to go after this because it's going to require tough choices. There may be a large number of variables that can be used to differentiate consumers on a given product category, yet in practice, it becomes impossibly cumbersome to work with more than a few at a time. So we have to focus. Whenever you focus, that's a tough choice because there's going to be a trade-off. So if you're looking for something to do like this with your market subgroups, here are a few audience intelligence tools that I've used in the past, and I would also recommend that you take a look at, because these tools will help you understand who your audience is and start breaking down the market. So that way you can focus on your core persona, but also your market and subgroup. So you've got it. You understand who you're going to be going after. Now we need to decide who we're going to target. We got to evaluate and select those. So step 2 is now targeting. Which of these are most likely to generate the conversions? So we need to make sure that it's attractive in mind. We got to figure out, are they big enough? Are they going to be profitable? Can we reach them? Because you'll need to take into account in your overall business strategy that the attractiveness of a segment and that competition that exists in that segment. So we're going to zero in on the segments that you feel will be the most profitable for your business. How do we do that? Let's break it down. Here's a really easy way to start to think about the evaluating of the attractiveness. So you've got segment 1, segment 2, segment 3. Maybe you're focusing on just 3 of them. Now, let's just do a quick strengths, weakness. You could do a full SWOT analysis if you wanted to here for each segment. But the key here is, what are your strengths to win? What are your weaknesses? These are going to be very important because this will also help your sales team. Think about your objection handling. Think about the questions that there might be coming up. But in the end, it's how well are we, are the existing segments being served by other companies? How large is that segment? Start thinking through these things. One of the ways that I like is Porter's. So Porter's 5 forces. And this is all about the market segmentation evaluation. And what he has done is he's basically broken it down into 5 undeniable forces that play a part in shaping every market and industry in the world, with some caveats, but the 5 forces are frequently used to measure the competition, intensity, attractiveness, and the profitability of an industry, of a market. So threat of new entrants, bargaining power of buyers, the threat of substitute products, the power of those suppliers, and then lastly, that rivalry among existing competitors. When you fill this out, you're now able to objectively understand and evaluate each target segment. So we can go back and say, okay, here is our target segment. We're going to focus on IT decision makers. It's roughly 7,600 people. Here's their geography. Here's their influencers. Here's the technology brand affiliations that they have with it. And now we can say, can we win? How well does this align? We'll use those segments. We'll list our strengths. We'll list our weaknesses, and we'll do the same thing for segment 2 and segment 3. And now we're able to evaluate objectively to say, hey, I think segment 1 is going to give us a clear path to win. Let's now focus our positioning and our marketing mix to focus on that one, while not focusing maybe on segment 2. This is the trade-off. These are the tough choices that you'll have to make. So, number 3, let's move on. We segmented the market. We are now focusing on the targeting, and now it's time to win. We now need to figure out what sets our product and services apart from the competition in the minds of your target audience. And there's a few ways to come at this. But just remember that your positioning is going to funnel in to your price, your product, your distribution, and your promotion. This is essentially the 4 Ps at work here. This isn't just positioning as in like a strategic narrative or your messaging. This is truly, how are we going to position our product, potentially our company, to win? These are what the outputs it's going to be affecting? It's going to be impacting price. It will be impacting the product. If you're serving front end devs, that's going to look different than if you're serving security focused devs, right? There's a difference there. So a common positioning exercise I've used in the past, and there are a lot of different ways to do this, but essentially, what is the product? What is that description? What is that market that you're going to be competing in? Who is that target segment? We just went through this. What are those competitive alternatives? And this includes competitors that are free. A lot of times in developer, you have to include open source. And a lot of times you just have to include like Excel. How many times is Excel the actual competitive alternative? Because it's just the status quo. It's just the way we've always done it. A lot of times it's manual processes. You need to list these because these are going to be extremely important. What is your primary differentiation? What attributes set you apart? Lastly, what are the key benefits of those differentiations, those attributes? Another way, again, to think about this is we're all familiar with April Dunford. Go read her book. It's amazing. We've all used it, I'm sure, but if you haven't, please go check it out. It's worth the read. And you can see she follows a very similar path where she looks at the competitive alternatives, what are those unique attributes, what is the value, the customers that care, and then what's the market you can win, right? So it's a very similar way of getting at it. Well, let's break down a few of these. How do we understand our customers' needs? So we've subgrouped it, we've targeted it. We got to go and understand, what does our customer need? And you need to understand this. We need to understand what they do, what is their occupation, what is their interest, when they buy. Understand the purchase cycle. Is this something that you could just offer a freemium and they can come in and start using it and then it'll eventually grow with them? Or is it something that's going to require a buying committee? Maybe they need the CTO's approval. Maybe they need cross-functionally the PM to be involved in whatever they're buying. Understand that, because this will impact how they buy. Is this something that they just buy from a website? Is it something they buy in person? Is it something that they're going to need a demo for? All of these things are impacting your customers' needs because they are going to expect something of you. I think we all know devs expect something, and it's a little bit different than that traditional model that we've all been used to, because you don't want to disappoint them. Once you disappoint, they may never come back. And that's incredibly important if you're going to try to gain that repeat business. So break it down, understand your customers' needs, fill out something like this. Then go out and understand the positioning map. Understand, is it complex? Is it price? Where does your competition fit? How are they approaching the market? Do you see any gaps? Incredibly important whenever you're thinking through your own product and how to price that product. Then write it down. This is that competitive positioning matrix. So again, you have your company, you have your competitors, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever it may be. Who are their target customers? So I've seen the same product be positioned for different teams. I've seen the same product be positioned. Take CRMs, for example. You got HubSpot, who's really focused maybe more on the marketers. You got Salesforce, who's more focused on sales team. You could take Intercom, a little bit more focused maybe on the CS team. So there are different ways to come about this and understand who your target customers are and where those overlaps are. What are your key benefits? How do you price it? Ultimately, what is your value prop? Once you do this competitive positioning matrix, you now have amazing battle cards too, to then equip your sales team with. So this is a win-win, because this is going to feed into your strategy for your positioning. And again, lots of ways to position. There isn't just one way. You could focus on a category and say, hey, we are the category leader, and when you become synonymous with that service. Think about Zoom. We now just say, hey, do you want to hop on a Zoom? Right? They have taken over video meetings. How about user? Position for a specific target group of users and or behavioral parameters. A lot of times, devs And the products that we are building for them will probably fall somewhere in here, maybe even under application, that this is the best for a certain type of application. Maybe you want to position under quality and price and say, hey, we are the most expensive product. We are the enterprise version of this product. If you want best in class, if you want the premium version, it's us. Or hey, we're actually going to skim off them and say, hey, you don't actually need to be charged that much. We're going to offer maybe a free tier or something like that. You can also then focus on your attributes. So this is positioning focused on zeroing in on like your unique selling proposition. These are your value props, and you can just focus on that. Maybe you've got a way that it's like a no code tool. That's an attribute. Hey, you can now do this without using code. But ultimately, it's thinking through, how do you get your product to stand out from the rest of the market? Is it more affordable, higher quality, and be able to position your products logically within the market as a whole? Incredibly important. But focus on how your positioning can win the largest amount of market share. That's what's going to be key, because now you can fill out number 3. So we have our target, with our segments. We then focused over here with our strengths and our weaknesses. Now we can take one and say, hey, for target or for segment 1, here's our strengths, here's our weaknesses, and we're going to select them and say, these are their top customer needs, and then here are the value props. And you're going to do this for every single segment. So this is just an example of maybe if you focused on segment 1, if you had another one, you could add to the right here and say, position the product, another segment, and so on and so on. So we have a good understanding of our segment in the market, how to target them, and how to position to win. It's now trying to figure out, how do we reach them? How do we develop our marketing mix? Because as I mentioned before, it's not a traditional buyer's journey. So how can you attract devs to your product? Well, again, going back, our positioning. However we decide to position, it's the marketing mix that's ultimately going to figure out how we position to them and how we get to them, right? So this is the 4 Ps, right? We all know price, product, promotion, place, but this exact makeup looks a little bit different, and it has various changes based on new technologies, ways of thinking, how you're pricing it, what are your unique selling props. So understand there are multiple ways. So you could say, hey, we've got a pretty big target market. Our product is fairly applicable to a lot. I'm going to go with the mass marketing. Now, this is pretty undifferentiated. You just kind of throw it out there. You kind of ignore segmentation. So pretty much everything that we've worked for. Or you could probably focus on like the last couple 3 here. The very bottom on micro marketing. This is a hyper focus. This is a strategy that focuses so narrowly that it caters just to the needs of individual marketing. So you're thinking of like just small segments. Maybe it's local type of marketing. I want to win devs in San Francisco that work at startups at this, right? And you're just kind of layering on, and as you're doing your micro targeting. So I think the vast majority of us are probably going to be somewhere in the middle with differentiated and niche marketing. Ultimately, this is going to feed in, right? So we've divided this market into subgroups. We now understand their characteristics. And now we're going to understand what they want, where they are, and how to talk to them effectively, right? And this is what's ultimately key, because now we want to figure out, how do we reach those markets? So you'll develop a quick, little template like this. You can say, hey, I'm going to fill in these boxes. How do I reach them? What are my platforms? And ultimately, how are you going to win them? Now, there's some work done by OpenView. They put together a developer-focused go-to-market playbook. Go check it out. It's really good. I'm a big fan of it. I would say that their go-to-market playbook mostly focuses on the distribution side of the 4 Ps. But one thing I really liked was this one, kind of talking about how they want to discover, how they want to start, activate, convert, and scale. So it's no longer this like traditional prospect lead opportunity. It's get them in, let them into the product, let them figure things out themselves, and then they'll convert and scale. And they gave some pretty good examples of products that are currently doing this. And a lot of them do this with freemium or like free trials. So take a look at this one. This is their product benchmark. Go ahead and check that one out as well. It's really good, because I think one of the biggest things that we all struggle with is trying to figure out, like, is it freemium, free trial, demo? When do I do these things? And I have actually found this 2x2 to be the most helpful when figuring this out. So it's, if you have a high complexity and you can have a high price, that's a demo. Now, if you're not as complex, you could probably get away with a free trial, as long as they can, like, basically, can they complete their POC? Can they get done with like a proof of concept quickly? Or maybe, hey, this is actually super easy to get started. I'm just gonna do a freemium version of it. It's easy, it's pretty cheap, it's $5 a seat. Maybe you have seat-based pricing. So go ahead and check this out. I think this was worth mentioning, because I know a lot of us in the developer marketing are trying to figure this out of what is our acquisition model? Like, how do we get devs into the product? And I found this to be super helpful. Lastly, when you think about your marketing mix, I wouldn't sleep on influencers in media. I think this is something that's kind of underrated for devs, but what you'll see here on the x-axis is mention volume. So in other words, it shows like how often software developers are sharing articles from media publications. The y-axis is showing the number of engagements resulting from those media mentions. And the size of each bubble is total impressions. So the total impressions in this context are the aggregate sum of like the followers for every person who is engaged. So really cool to kind of see here where devs are hanging out, where they're sharing things. And don't forget engaging those influencers and influencer marketing, bringing that kind of B2D, if you will, to B2C, and thinking of it that way. So let's do a quick recap of everything of what we're going to do, because we got to tell the world like what we are, what problem we solve, and why we're different. So what we've done here is this entire process is we define the market, we create segments, we evaluate them, we then create those profiles, we evaluate how attractive those are, we then select them, we then develop our positioning strategy for that target market. And then based off that positioning strategy, we can then implement our marketing mix. And lastly, measure performance. That's what's ultimately key for all of this. And by the end of it, you'll have something that looks like this. You'll have your segment market, your target market, your positioning for it, and then your ultimate marketing mix for product, price, promotion, and place. So 5 strategies that you need to develop your developer go-to-market playbook. And if you've enjoyed this presentation, let's connect. I'm happy to answer any of your questions that may have come up. Happy to share any slides that may have resonated with you. Just, tag me on LinkedIn, hit me up on Twitter. Happy to connect, and good luck on developing your developer go-to-market strategy. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back to the Developer Marketing Summit. We're about to join another amazing talk, but just before we do, I want to say a huge thank you to our sponsors, speakers, and you, our wonderful audience, for making this event possible. With expert presentations and inspirational discussions on the agenda, you are in for a real treat today. Please ensure you are sharing your feedback and asking questions in the comment section of the video, as our speakers will be answering them throughout their session. After the event, a great place to continue the conversation is in the new Developer Marketing Alliance Slack community. I'll be posting the sign up link regularly in the comments, so if you're not already involved, keep your eyes peeled and join the discussion. And remember, you can gain on-demand access to all of our exclusive event footage with a PMA Pro membership or Access All Areas pass. So with all of this in mind, let's dive back in. Hey everyone, hope you're all enjoying the Developer Marketing Summit so far. Up next, we have another amazing live session, so don't forget to leave your questions in the comment section. But yeah, everyone, please welcome Nate Owen, CEO of AppSambler.
Hello, everyone. I am so excited to be here today to talk with you about successful developer education. Who has done it and what does it look like? I want to thank the Product Marketing Alliance folks for the opportunity to share today, and I look forward to meeting all of you in the Q&A at the end. My name is Nate Ani, and I welcome you to email me or send me a message on Twitter if you have any questions or just want to say hi. So I started my career as a software developer. I even got a comp sci degree many moons ago. And pretty early on, I got involved with an open source community. And I can honestly say that I learned way more about software development as being a part of that community than I ever did getting a formal education at the university. And I really enjoyed being a part of these open source communities because there was this give first philosophy, freely sharing knowledge with each other without any commercial interest. And naturally, being a part of this community for so long, I eventually was called upon to share my knowledge. And so I found myself taking on another role, which was as an educator or a trainer, standing in front of developers, putting on my instructor hat. And lastly, as a tech entrepreneur, I started two companies, the first one being Jazzcarta, which is a web consulting company, and my current company, AppSambler, which makes an online learning platform for software companies. And so this background, I think, makes me uniquely qualified to speak on the topic today of successful developer education. Having been both a developer and an educator, and as a founder of a software company, I have a unique perspective on what kind of impact developer education can make on the overall success of a software company. So most of you, I suspect, are here because you've been tasked with increasing awareness and adoption of your product among developers. So first, we're going to talk about why developer education is not just important, but it's critical for the success of your product. Then I want to share with you some lessons we've learned working with some of the fastest growing software companies in the world. And much of their success hinges on one crucial activity, their ability to attract and educate developers. And so I'm going to share with you the key tactics and strategies that they're using to do this effectively. And then lastly, we're going to talk about how you can launch a developer education program at your company, or if you already have one, some actionable steps you can take to improve it and get even better results. So to illustrate just how important developer education is, this number represents the portion of sales opportunities that are not just lost as a direct result of developer influence. So this means you're losing about a third of your sales because the developers say no. Now, even though the developer doesn't traditionally have the budget, although more and more are getting it, they have enormous influence at these companies that you're trying to sell into. So if you don't get developer buy-in, they will reject the product, and you might as well kiss goodbye to that opportunity. Or if your salespeople do manage to make the sale, but the developer never endorses the purchase, they won't adopt your product and they will cancel the subscription at the next renewal. So this number alone should scare the living daylights out of your salespeople and the executive leadership at your company, if it hasn't already. So why is this happening? Well, there's been a fundamental shift in how software is purchased today. It's now a much more bottoms-up approach, which means that the users or the developers are doing a lot of investigation and evaluation well before the buyer even gets involved. So in this typical user and buyer journey, there are 8 steps, and the buyer doesn't even get involved until step 6, which is pretty late in the process. So if you're not doing everything you can to get developer buy-in in steps 1 through 6, you could pretty much forget about reaching the buyer because the developer will have already rejected your solution. So to simplify this even further, developers want to know what something does. They want to see it doing something amazing. That's the wow. They want to gain confidence that they can use it. That's the how. They want to test it out. And then they want to make a purchase. That's the buy now. Or they might recommend it to their boss to purchase it if they don't have the purchase authority. So for companies who make a tech product, there's typically a huge gap between the activation step and the conversion step. There's often silence as the developer does a proof of concept internally. Maybe they're not even using your public API. So this means that your marketing team is flying blind, and forget about providing any insight to your sales team. The sales is not going to reach out because there's no indication that the timing is right. Or worse, they're going to reach out prematurely and scare away the developer. But what if you could give the developer a reason to stay engaged and you could guide them along this journey? What if they would gladly give you their email address so you know who this anonymous developer is? Well, we're going to discuss today how successful companies are doing this. So what is the secret to keeping the developer engaged, you may ask? Well, it's quite simple, actually. Engineers are more interested in content that teaches them something rather than content that is just trying to get them to buy. It seems obvious, right? But it's rare that companies do the teaching part really well. So let's look at some examples from companies who have successfully launched thriving developer education programs. And I've distilled down for you 4 things, make that 3, that these companies are doing, which I believe has contributed to their success. There's obviously a lot more, but in the interest of time, I'm only going to cover 3 of them today. So the first thing that these successful companies are doing is that they're offering interactive courses, including hands-on labs. Now you might say, well, why not, just have a free trial, drop the developer into your dashboard? Developers are smart people. They should be able to figure it out on their own, right? Wrong. Engineers have little patience for a poor developer experience. And if you don't make it easy for them to grok your product, they're going to move on pretty quickly. So this DevOps engineer says she'll give you about 20 minutes and she's out of there. So what's the best way to do this? Well, when 800 developers were surveyed in 2019, they were asked what their preference was for learning new skills. And 83% of them said they preferred tutorials. This was the #1 preferred way of learning for these developers. And Casey at BotPress agrees that you should create content that makes initial use of your product as seamless as possible. And she goes on to say that any content that minimizes how long it takes for someone to get up and running, such as a how-to tutorial, should be prioritized. So as we saw earlier, developers rank tutorials as super important, but not all tutorials are created equal. So I want to talk about the downside of static tutorials and the benefits of interactive tutorials that provide the learner with a way to check their knowledge or grade their work. So SlashData surveyed almost 16,000 developers, and they asked them, what are the most important things that companies should offer to support developers? And what they found was that professional and experienced developers, unsurprisingly, cited that the most important things were documentation and sample code, tutorials, and how-to videos and tools, integrations, and libraries. But we know that the developer population is growing every year, and there is now a new generation of developers who need more than docs and tutorials. So the most successful companies don't just stop with docs and tutorials and say, our job is done here. They go the extra mile and they build out project-based courses with hands-on labs. And this is what Slashdata describes as the extended core. So docs and tutorials are table stakes these days, and every developer-oriented company is going to have those. What will differentiate you from other companies and at the same time create a superior developer experience is if you provide online courses with hands-on labs. So let's look at a few examples. So here's an example of a Snowflake data warehousing workshop course in which the learner is asked to watch a video and then answer some questions to gauge their understanding of what they just watched. Let's take a look. So here's the video. There's an interactive transcript where they can quickly jump. They can change the speed if it's too slow. And after they watch the video, they're asked several things about the video they just watched. And they can answer these questions and it gives them interactive feedback. If they get the question wrong, they can try it again. And these are knowledge checks. These are not graded. So the goal here is really just to check that the person actually understands the material and they were paying attention when they were watching the video. So in this way, they're sort of interacting with the learner and helping them and guiding them to the understanding about the material. So our customer Chef Software, now Progress Software, built the Learn Chef site to educate developers about cloud automation tools. And you can see they've got a bunch of different courses over here about their software. And in this short video, we're going to see how a learner enrolled in the Chef Custom Resources course. And with the click of a button, they can instantly spin up an environment and start doing the exercises. There's no downloads, no installs necessary. So the whole idea here is to make this frictionless. Let's take a look. So here they're going into their course, and when they click this button to launch their lab, it takes about 10 seconds, and they're immediately brought into a web-based IDE where they can open up a new Linux terminal and they can start running the Chef client command line tool. So literally from being in the course to needing the environment, that takes them about 10 seconds to get that environment. There's nothing to download, nothing to install. So I know what you're saying. Well, we have downloadable SDKs, we have Docker images, we have AMIs on Amazon. Well, the chances are that even with those things, you're losing some engineers, like the one we heard from before, who will give you 20 minutes. And after that, they're on to the next product in their shortlist. So Jody, a developer advocate at Chef, explains here why hands-on product sandboxes are so important. She says that developers need to be able to spin up the product quickly, because if they have to learn how to set up an environment just so that they can learn about your product, they're not going to stick around. Let's look at another example from our customer, InterSystems. So they have a bunch of getting started guides, which show the developer how to use the InterSystems Iris software to build different kinds of applications. So in this exercise, they're building a smart ticketing system. Now, normally there's a lot of setup required before the developer could even begin to start building this app. But thanks to the sandbox they provide, the developer is able to spin up not just an instance of the Iris software, but also a complete web-based IDE, which is bootstrapped with everything they need to start building the app. Again, the goal here is reducing friction and giving the developer a great learning experience. Now you might be thinking, well, those labs are great for downloadable, installable, open source software or SDKs, but what about SaaS products? Well, Snowflake has an autograder that they built for their Snowflake SaaS-based data cloud platform. So as the learner goes through the exercises in the Snowflake University courses, they're able to run scripts on the Snowflake side that check their work. And in this way, they get the immediate feedback. So we know how much developers like tutorials, and they're great as a first touch experience because they don't require the developer to register, and they are teaser content to get the developer excited about your product. But courses take that experience to the next level with knowledge checks, so the learner gets immediate feedback as they're going through the material. You have the ability to give pop quizzes or even timed exams. You can embed discussion forums into the courses so that developers can learn from their peers and not in isolation. You can issue certificates or badges to award them for their achievements. And most importantly, both you and the developer are able to track their progress, something that's pretty difficult to do with a simple static tutorial because it's just anonymous users that you'll see in Google Analytics. So the second thing that these companies are doing is that they recognize that learning is a continuous journey. There's no end because the product is always evolving and the developer's use of the product becomes more sophisticated as they use it more. So the learning doesn't stop after they've bought the product. So these companies are finding ways to nurture engagement with the developer and help them grow and learn new skills. So I love this quote from Ashley because it goes back to what I love about my early experiences with open source communities. Connecting with developers is about giving back. It's about teaching them something valuable. And that may not necessarily be about your product. She says, everything we do is about teaching. And this is coming from the CMO, Chief Marketing Officer. Teaching, not selling, is her strategy. So what successful companies like GitLab have realized is that what developers really value is learning new skills. So on the Learn Chef site, they're teaching their developer audience not just how to use the Chef products, but they're teaching them general developer skills such as DevOps and Git and Bash scripting. And what they found is that developers often end up on the Learn Chef site because they've Googled about DevOps or whatever. And before they know it, they're learning about Chef. Similar to the Learn Chef site, the Redis University site offers a bunch of courses about the Redis products. And they were experimenting with different ways to encourage learners to come back and complete the courses that they had enrolled in. And what they discovered that simply sending them an email every week, reminding them that their homework was due, worked wonders. And one surprising thing that they didn't expect is that they got a 67% open rate on these homework reminder emails. And the Redis marketing team was astonished because in the marketing world, that kind of open rate is just unheard of. So Snowflake has really thought about this idea of a continuous learning journey. So they've crafted multiple paths that you can take, and they encourage learners to continue to build on their previous skills and get deeper knowledge about the product. They've also built out a SnowPro core certification program. And you can see that you have the choice to earn your certification by taking only on-demand courses, or you can choose the instructor-led option. Snowflake also uses their university site to encourage learners to attend one of their free Data for Breakfast workshops. So this is another way that they're nurturing and helping people to continue growing in their knowledge of Snowflake's products. Okay, so it's great that we've seen how learners can get that immediate feedback, but what about a feedback loop for the company? As they say, you can't improve what you don't measure. So I want to show a short video of the kinds of data that Redis and Chef are able to capture, and then we'll talk about what they're doing with that data. Okay, so on the left, we're going to do a very fast whirlwind tour of a learner simulating what they're doing. They're answering questions, they're watching videos, they're submitting assignments, and over on the right, we are tracking all of the events that we're capturing as they're doing these activities. So what videos are they playing? What problems are they submitting? And here, when the learner clicks this request certificate button, you'll notice that there's an event that gets fired. And we have all the data here about who requested that certificate, when they requested it, what course was it for. So what good is all this data? Well, let's see. This learning data informs and answers critical questions that your organization wants to know. Your educators and your instructors want to know, well, how can we make our content better? Your marketing team wants to know, well, who's highly engaged? Your sales team wants to know, well, when's the right time to reach out? I don't want to reach out prematurely. The product teams want to know, well, where are people getting stuck in the product? What are the features that they most want to learn about? And your executive leadership team wants to know, well, how does all this education drive more revenue and reduce cost? So with so many companies now selling their software in the subscription model, Zuora introduced this concept of a subscriber identity record that gives you a whole bunch of information about each subscriber. Similarly, companies like Chef and Redis are collecting all kinds of data about learners, which allows them to build what we call a developer identity record. And with this data, these companies can then send highly personalized messages to these developers to guide them on their learning journey. So for Chef, this means being able to track course enrollments and completions and badge activities in Marketo and tag all this information in Salesforce. Why is this important for Chef? Well, it enables them to perform deep dives on engagement metrics. They can identify user personas and enable marketing touchpoints. That also helps them to better understand the learning journey and gives them a way to share reports through the entire company using Salesforce. Redis goes so far as to consider any learner who's completed a multi-week course as an MQL. So you have the funnel. If they've graduated, they're considered an MQL. Redis has even been able to measure not just MQLs, but they've been able to make the connection of recurring revenue where the first touch that they had with that person was that they took a Redis University course. And Alvin describes in this video, he describes Redis University as a sophisticated marketing program that gives them information that they wouldn't have otherwise gotten. So in looking at how investing in developer education has helped these companies, they've reported that it's had a positive impact on lead generation, increasing the number of certified developers, building awareness in developer communities, and increasing engagement and product adoption. Just incredible results that they've seen. So as we've seen from these examples, there are a lot of moving parts. So I want to briefly describe what I think you need to reach this level of maturity in your developer education program. And it comes down to three main things. So the first is getting the right people on your team. The second is working with the right partner. And the third is selecting the right product and tools. So let's start with the right people. So in older organization design, you had more siloed departments. But in the modern software organization, the teams in the organization are much more interdependent. There's a lot more cross-pollination between the different teams. So if you believe the best way to attract potential developers is to produce quality educational content, then you probably don't want your product marketing team producing that content. You'll likely get very polished stuff that sets off the BS detector in most developers. So good educational content is designed with learning objectives in mind and addresses the user's technical problems in an authentic way. So if you needed to have brain surgery, would you go to your family doctor? No, you want to find the best surgeon who specializes in doing brain surgery. And I see so many software companies select partners or vendors who have this one-size-fits-all approach, who don't really understand the unique education needs that developer-oriented companies have. So some questions you might want to ask them are, well, how many software companies have they worked with before? Do they have a way for learners to spin up hands-on lab environments? Can they provide instructional designers who specialize in creating technical educational content? Is their system a silo, or can you integrate it with other third-party systems like CRMs, marketing automation, and data warehouses? So let's talk about choosing the right product. So most developer-oriented software products require more education and training in order for the customer to adopt and fully realize the value. That means there's a need for a solution that can embed quick and easy learning experiences during the pre-sale stages, guided instruction in sandbox environments during a proof of concept stage, as well as more comprehensive courses and certifications in the post-sale stages. So from what we've experienced working with a lot of software companies is that there are three capabilities you need to be able to offer a great developer education program. The first one is a way to author and deliver courses with knowledge checks and certifications. The second is a way to deliver on-demand sandboxes so that learners can do hands-on exercises and learn by doing. And the third is a robust integration story to get the data out of the course and labs platform and into your business tools. So you can use this data to launch personalized campaigns, identify buying signals, and improve your technical content and your products. This is my only sales pitch slide. One thing I want you to take away from this slide is that AppSembler exists to reduce the cost and complexity for companies to create hands-on learning experiences for developers and other technical users. And we have a unified platform that helps software companies go to market much faster than they could if they were trying to do it by themselves. Okay, so to summarize the key takeaways from today, what we've learned is that companies with successful developer education programs are offering interactive courses with hands-on labs. They're nurturing their developer audience with valuable educational content, and they're encouraging them to come back to continue their learning journey. And they're using telemetry to not only measure and improve the educational content, but to generate new leads and drive new revenue for the business. If you want to build your own developer education program, we see that the successful companies have a dedicated education team, even if it's only one person to start. They find the best partner to work with, one who has experience around developer education. And they make sure that they're selecting a product that's going to not just work for them today, but it's something that will scale with them as they grow. I think we have a little bit of time for questions. Thank you so much for your attention. It's been a pleasure to present to you today. And if we don't have time to get to your questions, here's my contact info, where I'm always happy to continue the conversation.
Hi, Nate. Thank you so much. That was really, really great. And yeah, we've had loads and loads of requests for your slides as well. So obviously we can get them sent over to everybody. But yeah, let's jump in with a couple of questions. We've got a couple of minutes, so let's go through that. So how many people do you need to get an education team off the ground?
Yeah, great question. As I hinted before, you really only need one person. When we started working with Redis, they were called Redis Labs back in the day. Elvin was the one-man band. He basically was creating all the video content. He was creating all the lab content. He was doing some of the promotional stuff. So you really don't need a whole team of people to start an education team. You can just start with one person, and then you can add additional people as needed as you grow.
Amazing. Yeah, I think that will be music to a lot of people's ears, and yeah, really, really useful stuff to know as well. What are some of the key metrics for tracking how successful your post-sale developer education program is?
Yeah, so I'd say one of the most common ones is completions. So how many people are actually getting through the courses, and enrollments is another one. Not everyone who signs up for a course necessarily has the objective to get to the end of the course. One way that you can encourage people to complete a course is to offer a certificate or a badge or something like that. But a lot of people are just taking these courses because they need sort of just-in-time learning. They have to solve a key business problem on their job, and they need to know something. And so they go into a course, they learn the thing they need, and then they're done. So that's one of the metrics. I think some of the other metrics are how many leads are being generated from the site. It's sometimes difficult with attribution, multi-touch attribution, to know, well, did that lead come because they took a course, or was that just one step in their journey? But that's another thing that we see these companies tracking, is being able to tie back revenue back to educational content that they're creating.
Right then, and I think we've got time for one more question. So how do you, and what's the best way to encourage resistant developers?
Best way to encourage resistant, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think making it fun, making it easy, and really putting yourself in the shoes of the developer and thinking about what are all the different things that are going to be a blocker for them to get to success, whatever you define success as. Maybe success is, Hello World, getting the first Hello World set up. So I think it's really about removing friction and making that a fun experience for the developer. I mentioned earlier that Redis was sending out emails to remind people about their homework. That's another way, is just little gentle nudges to remind people that this is a journey, this is a learning journey, and we all want to help them achieve their learning goals.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah, really, really great session. Really great talking to you as well. If people want to connect with you, can they do so on LinkedIn, or what's the best way?
Yeah, my email is right there. I'm also on Twitter, so I welcome anyone who wants to talk more. Just shoot me an email.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Nate. It was a pleasure.
Thank you all.
Whether you're joining one of our events for the first time or if you're a seasoned regular, welcome to the Developer Marketing Summit. We have an incredible selection of innovative content lined up for you today, but before we dive in, I just want to say a huge thank you to our sponsors, speakers, and you, our lovely audience, for joining us. From wherever in the world you are watching, we're sure you'll enjoy today's talks. To get the most out of these sessions, please make sure you're sharing your feedback and asking your questions in the comment section for our speakers to answer. Each of today's sessions recordings will be uploaded into our on-demand content library, which you can access with a PMA Pro membership or Access All Areas Pass. We are also really excited to announce the launch of the Developer Marketing Alliance becoming its very own community. You can now join our Slack channel to connect with peers, get access to fresh content, and discover new opportunities. So with all of this to look forward to, let's get started.
Hi everyone, and thank you for tuning in for today's Fireside Chat. I hope you're enjoying the Developer Marketing Summit, and don't forget to ask us questions using the chat, or also feel free to connect after this session. My name is Ginevra, and I am a PMM working on developer engagement at Square, which you might also know as Block. And I am here today with Nishant and Jeremy to go through a few best practices in terms of messaging, working with developer influencers, and just anything that we feel we want to share with the audience about marketing to developers. So let's introduce our speakers for today. Nishant, do you want to say something about yourself?
Sure. Hey, thanks for the intro, Ginevra, and nice meeting you, Jeremy. Good to be here. For everyone else, I'm Nishant Karyala. I have been a developer, a product marketer, and a product manager in my lifetime so far. And to be honest, even though I'm in product management right now, product marketing continues to be my favorite one thus far. So I'm really excited to be here with you guys and chat with you a little bit about developer marketing and my philosophies around doing right by the developers.
Thank you. Now off to Jeremy, who's joining from Docker.
Awesome. Hey, everybody. I'm super excited to be here today. So my name is Jeremy Castile. I am the Senior Director of Product and Alliances Marketing at Docker. Just a little bit about me. I actually started my career as an engineer. My undergraduate degree is electrical engineering. I started in the semiconductor industry, which is a great place to chop your teeth and get some skills. Learned a lot about building great products, interesting products, kind of the intersection of software, hardware, robotics, chemistry, physics. So definitely got interested in product marketing when I was there, working as an engineer, bringing products to market and working with sales and go-to-market teams. So from there, that was really my launch point. I spent about 7 or 8 years as an engineer, and then I jumped over into product marketing. I worked for a company called AppCon in the network visibility space, and that's where I really started diving into cloud and SaaS. Spent a lot of time getting AWS certified, which was really fun. And then I moved over to New Relic, which is fully application performance, all about observability, and was a PMM there, principal PMM, leading the PMM charge for application performance monitoring. And now I'm at Docker. Docker is the #1 most wanted and #2 most loved developer tool. It's an awesome privilege to get to lead the product marketing team at Docker. Our tools reduce complexity for developers so they can focus on building amazing applications. And so I'm super excited to be a part of this conversation today.
Nice. So we have some very meaty backgrounds here. So let's dive right into it, and let's kick this off with some canary testing. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with this concept, it's taken from software development. It basically has to do with just rolling out a new piece of software to a smaller subset of users to just manage risk and just measure impact. Now, this can also be applied to testing messaging. And I know Jeremy has probably encountered this practice sometime during his career. So do you want to share something about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So canary testing is super interesting. I think for marketers, for PMMs that are, in the developer space, it's something that we can learn from, right? So canary testing is essentially a practice where software development teams will release a software update to a subset of their users. So in a way, it's kind of similar to A/B testing, but for software developers, they're trying to test in production in a real world scenario. So they want to find bugs or see if their code has weaknesses or will break in a production environment without impacting all of their users. They're just impacting a subset of users. Then they can essentially fix those bugs before they continue to roll out the software release to the rest of production. So
Sure.
Yeah, and I think it's an awesome best practice for DevOps. Now I think PMMs can learn from this technique, and we can leverage that to our advantage for message testing. So essentially, it's about building your messaging and going and testing it in real world scenarios. So like at Docker, we'll test that with a subset of customers. We'll test that with a community of folks, and then essentially what we're able to do is before we do a big release, we can actually test our messaging for a new product or a launch, get feedback from a subset of our users or customers, incorporate that into our messaging before we go to launch.
Interesting. So Nishant, have you ever used something like this, or maybe do you use other types of message testing?
Yeah, I actually love the idea of using the concept, something that is relevant to the dev world, to message to developers, right? So, and this is something that I do as a product manager as well. Like before we take it to 100% in production, we release things gradually and make sure that nothing is breaking as we hit different data centers, right? So yeah, absolutely. And on similar lines, I want to introduce the idea of minimum viable marketing. So we have something called minimum viable product on the product side, but in both the cases, the core concept is that you want to test things out with the least amount of risk and investment. So for example, when I start a new idea, be it a messaging idea or a go-to-market strategy, my philosophy is that, okay, once we have identified, we need to verify before we start amplifying it. So in the verification phase, what I do is I go for quick and inexpensive mechanisms to test these ideas. It could be, to your point, Jeremy, like quick website A/B testing, or some email subject testing. In some cases, like talking to people, to your internal teams, or go to a meetup and chatting with a few folks from their space, right? And at some point, you feel like, okay, this is it. This is working. And then we start amplifying. So at this point, I generally think in terms of, okay, can I write a blog? Can I write a white paper? Can I talk to analysts and press and let them know about this new theme in the market and have them start talking about the product, right? So the goal is to minimize your risk along the way and test your ideas, be it a messaging testing for your primary persona or secondary persona, right? Or be it a GTM strategy. So I love that idea of being able to pick existing mechanisms and best practices in other worlds and bringing it to the product marketing world. So thanks for sharing that, Jeremy.
You bet.
So you just mentioned something very interesting that I think we should dive a bit deeper into, which is actually leveraging an audience or some part of the audience that can amplify our messaging. So let's talk a bit about developer influencers. Now, Jeremy, do you guys work with developer influencers at Docker? What's your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So we, as a PMM marketing to developers and marketing products for developers, I think it's super important to have a network of trusted developer influencers. It's important for a number of reasons, but one of the most important reasons is you want to have that authentic developer voice. Leveraging developer influencers with things like message testing or content creation, thought leadership, just general feedback on go-to-market is basically going to help you, make your go-to-market that much more potent, that much more effective, and resonate that much better with developers. So at Docker, we actually have a number of folks, both internally and externally. So it's great because we have an opportunity to meet with a number of folks that are very knowledgeable about Docker. So we have a program called Docker Captains. So this is a group of folks that are, they don't work for Docker, but they're experts about Docker. Some of them have their own, large platforms, and they do trainings and things like that. So being able to, if you think about kind of going off of the last topic that we were just on, but even things like early access programs and reading some of these developer influencers into a launch ahead of the launch to get feedback and even participate. We recently did a launch at Docker back in August, and we did this with a number of folks, both Docker captains, internal engineering teams, and just influencers in the developer space outside of Docker. And what we saw was by bringing them in, internal and briefing them ahead of the launch, when we did go to market with the launch, we saw folks come out that we had briefed, and like in the Twitter sphere and in other channels, really come out and champion our new products and our new pricing, and lend that that voice that gives validation and kind of proof point. Beyond just Docker talking about itself, you have kind of these third-party experts. So I think especially when we think about developer marketing for PMMs, don't be afraid to go out there and make those connections with folks that are developers, that are knowledgeable, that do know the tools that you provide, and see if you can't pull them into your go-to-market.
Yeah, I think you just touched on a very relevant topic, because especially when talking to developers, paid marketing doesn't work very often. So it's very, very important to really have advocates who can really influence the others with some authentic experience. Let's say, I don't know, use cases or just partner case studies or anything like that. We really do that at Square as well, and it does really, really work. So tying back into the concept of a wider community, I guess, what has been your experience with this, Nishant?
I mean, first of all, let me be honest, I'm kind of jealous of Docker's community. You have such a huge community, and you have that luxury of saying, okay, here are the champion that I'm interested in and I want to focus more on, and there are all these other people that I can pick and choose from and prioritize, right? So that's a brilliant problem to have. I would like to talk to the rest of the audience. Some of us may not have that luxury. We may have to create that community from the scratch. And when I say something from the scratch, it's not like there are no champions at all. It's more like, okay, you wouldn't have that breadth of people or breadth of knowledge that you can tap into, right? So that's where it becomes critical to be able to bring those SMEs into the pool and have them get excited about speaking about your product in various forums. And the way I went about it back when I was at Progress Data Direct was, let me make sure we're on the same page. So Progress Data Direct, we made ODBC, JDBC drivers for data engineers and data scientists. And it was very tricky to get them to talk about this product because it's such a back-end product. Things work, it's good. When they don't work, people want to talk about it. So that's how most developers, most consumers are, right? So from that perspective, the way I got them excited about it is like introducing new ideas into the market. Like I'll take an example. So there was this new standard called OData that not everyone was completely familiar with. So I would go to a meetup, chat with people about this idea. And this is another way of message testing, see how they're receiving this idea and take that feedback and write a blog about it. Like they have a ton of FAQs at that point. I wouldn't know all the answers. So I go back, write a blog about it, and then share it back to them. And then they start having conversation about it on Twitter, right? So now we have a few people who understand this concept, and I was able to tap into those contacts every time I needed some information on the product, or every time there was like a chat going on a Twitter channel, I would bring them in. And another interesting thing that happened along those lines was at some point I was in a Gartner conference, and I was using a partnership with Gartner to have an analyst review of our product roadmap. And surprisingly, we hit it off very well. So I think 6 months from there on, I was able to partner with him to actually speak about OData in a webinar. Now there was like this free event that we were able to sponsor because usually getting the speakers is super expensive, especially from Gartners and Forresters, right? So this was one of those, be proactive, educate people, get them excited, and they want to be part of this initiative as well. So I also tap into my internal teams and the SEs and developers. And along those lines, whenever there's a webinar and there's like at the end of the topic, I let the people know that, okay, if you are interested in this topic, reach out to me so that we can work on something together. So it's always about, again, like marketing is also a little bit about playing to people's motivations. Some people are motivated by technology, some people are motivated by fame, some people are motivated by like a community, giving back to the community. So you have to understand what a particular person is interested in and position it accordingly and give them relevant opportunities. Does it make sense? Any questions on that?
No,
Yeah,
I think,
it completely does. Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
it's actually very aligned with my experience because like, I feel like I can relate to both of your experiences because Square has a very big developer community in the US, but I look after Europe and we just kind of recently entered the European market. And I feel like most of our influencers are from the US and all the narrative has a tendency to be very US centric. So
Right.
do you guys manage these programs on a global scale as well? Do you feel a similar problem that I am experiencing?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, developers are all over the globe. Certainly, as Nishant mentioned, we're super fortunate at Docker to have a massive, community of awesome folks building really cool stuff. So yeah, we definitely engage with developers, globally. I think meetups are an awesome way to really go and talk, directly to users and kind of get their feedback. So I think that's a great call out, Nishant. And then also, yeah, like, at Docker, our internal engineering team, and I know we had mentioned this, but like is a great resource for, developers and leveraging them. At Docker, our entire company is distributed. So we have folks working really all over the globe. But we work with our internal developers to develop content for developers, right? So you have the people that are building the product, writing blogs or, short how-to guides or getting started. So yeah, definitely some value there in using folks internally if you don't have like a large community of users already.
Yeah, and Ginevra, to your question, like from a global perspective, that was always a very interesting dynamic, at least from a Progress Data Direct perspective. So this is one of those tools that you would use when you need very high performance. And there's a topic that we'll cover a little bit later as well. Like people from India or like some of those developing countries, they're less likely to buy products by themselves. So from that perspective, we tend to focus a little more on the US and European market or the Japanese market, which are like thinking in terms of, oh, let me build an application that is like robust and cared for everyone versus some of the smaller shops, they might be thinking, let me do with whatever I can. There's like a ton of open source content out there. I will use that before I cross a chasm and start dealing with some of those last mile challenges, and then I will shift to a more service oriented product maybe. So like from that perspective, while there are champions everywhere, sometimes it makes sense to prioritize and pick and choose from the community where they're able to most relate to. So in my case, I used to pick from US and Europe wherever possible.
That makes sense. So what would be your favorite form of content when working with influencers?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's probably a number of different things, and it's a lot about what channel the content will go to as well. Like developers, you know, they're super unique in what channels they go to for content, and they really have a good nose for sniffing out content that's like marketing based, where you're trying to sell something, versus value or education. So, you know, I think my rule of thumb there for everyone, you know, creating content for developers is come at it from an educational, value-driven, you know, perspective, no nonsense. And so I would say blogs definitely help. You know, and anything where you can provide things where developers can try it on their own. So like in our technical blogs at Docker, we try and always provide like code snippets or links to sample repos. So developers can download the code, play with it, try it on their own. We have a really cool feature called developer development environments where you can share it easily. You can bundle up all your dependencies and share with your team. So really creating content in a way that developers are used to consuming. You know, don't force them to go out of their way to you know, have to consume content. If you can build it into their workflow, even better. In-product messaging is super effective there as well. So.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, I've seen in my experience at Square as well, we usually run a very big event on a yearly basis that's called Unboxed, where we also announce new releases for our APIs. And one of the big things are always workshops. Tying into what you said about sharing snippets, it really creates a lot of engagement because, you know, it's not some kind of, let's say, passive content that you just absorb, you read or you watch. You can really play with it and use it. So yeah, completely agree. You also touched on a topic that I think might be dear to quite a few of us, which is how to actually market a paid product. So there is quite a transition between a free product and a paid one. So Nishant, have you ever found yourself in a situation like this one?
Yeah, I mean, like that's actually a good segue. I wanted to talk a little bit about what we were chatting earlier, as well as tie it back to the DIY versus buying, right? So for me, personally, I've always felt that, okay, the core skill for a product manager or a product marketer or any business manager in general is like to be able to empathize with your end users. And from that perspective, it is extremely critical for someone to be able to understand, okay, what is a typical developer going through? And that's where we'll be able to map it back to, okay, what is their preferred content? What is their preferred channel? What is their preferred format, right? So everything will tie back to the persona. So some of the things that I wanted to highlight were like, number one, I've worked with agile teams in the recent past, and they are constantly running. Developers have a very they have like time crunches, and they're always on fire. And that means they're looking for easier solutions that fit into their existing world. So from that perspective, like they would want an easy onboarding. They would want to try a product easily without having to get a bunch of approvals. So they want to try and see it for themselves. And to Jeremy's point, tutorials and video demos will be super critical, right? Because now they're able to quickly try the product without having to guesstimate, okay, how does this work? I think this API looks familiar with this, so let me try this. So there shouldn't be any guesswork involved. So as we make the onboarding easy, it becomes easier for them to like start liking the product, and eventually we get them to the stage of they have low or no budgets, so giving those free trials. So that becomes super critical in the sense that I have been a developer. I would think I'll try everything on the internet before I start buying something. I'll build myself, I'll give up that problem altogether. I'll talk to my peers, I'll do everything except buy the product. So giving them enough value with the free trial is super important so that they can actually experience the product as a whole and then gradually have this conversation in the context. So I always say like help people before you start selling them. So help them solve the problem. Appreciate the context they're living in. If there's an open source tool out there, help them understand how to make that work as well. And then tell them why will our product do better than the open source product. Just don't say that, okay, this is not good enough, because they wouldn't trust you. They, to your point, Ginevra, earlier, they do not like to be sold to. They do not want marketing stuff. They want like hardcore result, like, okay, how do we quantify? If you say your product is better than your competitors, tell me how. Don't tell me this is the best product in the market, right? But they're going directly to Stack Overflow or all these developers, and going into those channels and becoming the thought leaders in those spaces. Like, people need to look up to us for any sort of problem that they're trying to solve in that space. So that's how I go about going after these developers. And again, like from free to fee, it's a conversation, gradual convincing. And if they don't buy and if they're happy with the free stuff, please do that. We will help you with that as well. That's always been my attitude so far. Jeremy, how did you do go about moving people from DIY to buying stuff?
Yeah, no, it was just, I enjoyed listening to your perspective. I think you had a lot of great, golden nuggets in there. So it's always fun to hear, especially, your lived experience as a developer and product manager, so it's fun to hear that perspective. But yeah, I mean, I think there's so much here to unpack. I think, my experience, I've experienced free to fee both when my time at New Relic. We had a big initiative, kind of sort of refactoring, like our pricing and packaging there. And then, even at Docker. So at Docker, I guess I'll start with this. Docker is developer obsessed. It's actually, that's one of our values, one of our core, sort of corporate virtues, right, is developer obsession. So we want to be the tool of choice for developers for building cloud native applications. So a lot of the free to fee, I don't want to sound too much like Captain Obvious, but a lot of it starts with the product strategy. And a lot of if you're even having conversations around free to fee, chances are the product strategy is already looking in that direction. But a lot of it has to do with friction-free, zero friction for onboarding for new developers. That's so much of kind of like getting to the free to free. First, you have to start with the free part. So that's creating like an experience that's easy to onboard. Developers can quickly get up and running with your product, and they don't have to get out the credit card. So creating and they can get value from it. So, at New Relic and Docker both, like I've seen how, the product teams have really focused on delivering a very generous free tier. So developers can get started quickly and get value out of the product at that level. So now at Docker, what we see with just tremendous adoption, tremendous growth, it's like a de facto tool for developers building cloud native applications. Is it really becomes a question, not even at the developer level, but at their managers level or even higher, where you start to go, okay, well, we have hundreds or even thousands of developers using this tool. It's part of our pipeline, for building and deploying applications. We want to invest as a team that's using this tool. We want to invest in this product. So then it's creating, features at that layer for like administrators, for managers, that makes it easier to scale the adoption of the tool. Then all of a sudden it becomes so much easier to pay, in our case, for like a subscription. And then developers, the strategy we've taken is just make it easy for developers so they don't have to convince their boss to go and pay for this tool. It's just almost like obvious, like, yeah, hey, this makes us all more productive or makes our code, whatever it is, more reliable, reduces complexity, whatever it may be. And it's just obvious for, developer managers and folks above that it's like, yeah, this is an investment. We want to make an investment in this tool. And so don't put that heavy burden on the developers to have to go and convince their boss to, you know, the value proposition for the product.
Sure.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
also
I
actually
can
want
see
to
for you.
call out
Yeah.
something. Sorry, Ginevra. I just wanted to call out something that was really interesting. Like it might be overlooked by most people, but that is what I feel like separate like really good marketing managers from others, in the sense that you called out the fact that you do not want to ask people for their credit card. So that's like a very obvious thing for many people, but if you think about it, it gets overlooked. So the strategy team or the product team or the leadership at some level is making the choice of, do I take the credit card information or not? And that's going to be like a big shift in terms of how many MALs or MQLs you're getting every month, right? So even though developers are unique, they're also still consumers. They still have the same problem that usual consumers have. And it is important to be able to, again, go back to that initial call out, that be empathizing with them all through the journey. And as long as you're paying attention to every step, you're able to make the right choices everywhere. Like the larger strategy, I think like people like Jeremy nailed it. They are able to tell people, okay, how to go about a certain stream. But if you're implementing it tactically, pursuing some excellence in a particular pillar, that's where it becomes important to be able to understand your end users accurately.
Yeah, well, absolutely. A frictionless free trial is going to make all the difference every time. Like even just what Jeremy was mentioning about offering a generous tier for like the free plan, it just really adds up so much in terms of loyalty, because basically you're offering so much, and at the end of the day, the switching cost is just so high, and the user has really had the time to learn how to use a product and how to really appreciate it. So it just doesn't really make any sense to switch, right?
For sure.
Okay, so well, I think we're at time, which is a shame because I feel like we could just keep chatting all day, but we have to go. So, well, this was amazing, and I hope you guys from the audience enjoyed it as much as we did. And thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Nishant, and thank you very much for attending today.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you. It's a pleasure. Yeah, feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn. Happy to chat more.
Hi everyone, we hope you're enjoying the Developer Marketing Summit so far. Just before we jump into the next session, we are so excited to be launching the Developer Marketing Alliance as its own community. So keep your eyes peeled for the link to our new Slack community in the comments, where we'll be carrying on the discussion of all things developer marketing after the summit. Join to connect with peers, ask questions, get access to fresh content, hear about upcoming events like this one, and discover new opportunities. Also, don't forget you can re-watch these amazing sessions whenever you want with on-demand access. All you need to do is sign up for an Access All Areas Pass or PMA Pro membership. With a PMA Pro membership, you'll also get footage from past events, exclusive content, templates, frameworks to help you excel in your role, plus so much more. But for now, back to the Developer Marketing Summit.
Hi everyone, up next we have another great live session, so don't forget to leave your questions in the comments for the live Q&A at the end. But for now, please welcome Gary Gonzalez, the Managing Director of Catchy.
Thank you so much. We're excited to be here. So welcome to the session, everyone. Big thank you to the Product Marketing Alliance for hosting us here today, and let's jump into it. So first and foremost, for those of you that are familiar with Catchy, you've probably figured out by now that I am not Richard Herring. My name is Gary. I've taken on the role of Managing Director here at Catchy. as we've expanded the team over the past few years. So Richard's going to take it easy today. He's going to let me take the wheel, and we're going to dig into the top 5 trends in developer marketing. So first and foremost, for those of you that we haven't met before, we're Catchy. We've been helping to build, grow, and manage the biggest developer marketing programs in the world for over 12 years at this point. And in that time, we've had the opportunity to work with the best and brightest in developer marketing. And we also get to do quite a bit of work in emerging tech, which these days means we're working in Web3, we're working in gaming, we're working in the metaverse. It's a really cool look across the industry. And one of the reasons, one of the interesting things about our business is that we operate on what we call a hybrid consulting and agency model. And I say all of this not because you've all joined us for a 30-minute long Catchy sales pitch, but rather because this positioning, in working with all of these different brands and all these different types of work, it means we get to look across the entire spectrum of the developer marketing industry at any given time. It's a very different perspective than someone perhaps on the brand side who goes very deep on one set of technologies or practices. At any given point in time, we get to look across the entire horizontal scope of the industry, which gives us kind of an interesting perspective on everything. And in this, we get to do a lot. So our consulting team is constantly doing competitive benchmarking across the industry. Our research team is working with all of our clients. They're talking to developers. They're doing trend measurement across the industry, running focus groups, running qualitative and quantitative sessions. We have an outstanding market research PhD that leads all of these activities, and she's unearthed a lot of amazing insights over the years. And then on the other side, on the agency side, our creative and marketing teams are working directly with the best-in-class brands in the business to create content that reaches developers around the world. So again, I want to assure everyone that you haven't signed up for a half-hour-long Catchy sales pitch. That is all that we're going to say about Catchy and our work there, but rather to give you an idea of where these trends are coming from. Especially when we look into a lot of these players in the emerging tech space, spaces like gaming, spaces like Web3, this is where we see a lot of risk-taking and innovation happening. So it's a lot of what we're going to be talking about in this session today. The only other housekeeping item before we start getting into the trends is a big shout out to everyone on Team Catchy. I'm the one who's sitting here kind of going through all these trends with you, but the presentation, the information in it was put together by pretty much everyone on the team. So you're getting the full power of Catchy's team at your fingertips in this session here today. So without any further ado, let's get into our 5 top trends for developer marketing in 2022. So we're going to kick things off right away by talking about one of the big macro trends that we're seeing in the industry right now, largely as a result of Web3's explosion over the past 2 years. A good place to start when we talk about this is an end-of-year report from Electric Capital, which estimates now that there are close to 18,500 monthly Web3 developers. Over the year, we saw 34,000 new developers commit Web3 code, and that was in 2021 alone, and that was the highest in history. And when you look at the chart that they've put together, you can see that this is growing exponentially and has not slowed down as we've gotten into the start of 2022. It's pretty interesting stuff. And although this number, this 34,000 devs committing active code may seem relatively small considering the overall size of the developer industry, it's important to recognize that we are hitting a bit of a turning point in Web3. So blockchain technology itself has always been interesting, but investing as a developer, investing years of your career into it posed a pretty big risk. This idea of, is it worth leaving a 6-figure job with stock options and insurance to bet it all on a technology that might not succeed or might not be around in a few years? And for many developers, this risk profile was enough to stay away. And it wasn't really until 2020 that we see crypto going mainstream in the big way that we've all seen over the past few years. And all of a sudden, this sector that had relatively low developer interest had trillions of dollars at its disposal to drive innovation. So now we're at this really interesting turning point where Web3 can offer top developers the same, if not better, incentive to move into what was once considered the Wild West of blockchain. And the result of this has been kind of what we're calling like the most destabilizing economic conditions in the developer space, or at least that we've seen in a long time. For the past decade, competition for developer talent has largely been predictable, right? It was FANG companies, it was a handful of unicorn startups, and everyone kind of bounced around. Developer talent really bounced around between those companies and those startups. But now we have this entirely new sector that's armed with seemingly limitless cash, and they're coming for developer talent. And we see that with the number of people, again, kind of spiking, as you can see in the chart, exponentially in the last 2 years. So what does this mean? Kind of what do we think is going to be the impact on developer marketing and on the industry in general from all of this? There's really 3 things that we've kind of been looking at. The first one, full stop, we're going to see increased competition for developer talent across the board. And this means that developer acquisition programs are going to be more critical than ever for companies that want to stay relevant and drive innovation. And that's developer acquisition as far as recruiting and getting developers to come work for you. And also, as we look at third-party developer ecosystems, again, increased competition. If you run a third-party developer ecosystem, a marketplace, anything like that, you're going to see a lot of increased competition for developer attention spans. The second is that developer relations programs are going to change rapidly. So as more and more developers dip a toe into the very community-oriented Web3 space, we're going to see a change. Web3 moves fast, and it's really accelerating the adoption of platforms like Discord and Telegram in the developer community. People are using new platforms, they're using existing platforms in different ways, and we're really seeing speed. Just because it is such a tight-knit community, developers are becoming used to a lot of increased speed and responsiveness from the community and the companies that they're working with. Really interesting one. And of course, this makes all of these new platforms and approaches much more important to DevRel strategy than they may have been over the last 10 years. And finally, we're seeing developer marketing in the form of content and education programs is really going to be increasingly crucial for everyone in the space. And again, this is a result of competition for talent heating up, competition for developer time, developer headspace really heating up. And this, quite frankly, is going to open up a lot of opportunities for DevRel and developer marketing practitioners as these new companies seek to learn from the best practices of Web 2. So we're not only seeing in these first 2 points kind of this shift in developer talent, but we also think there's going to be a big shift in the developer marketing space and the DevRel space as practitioners. For everyone here who's a practitioner in those different disciplines, your skills are going to be in demand from, again, an entirely new sector that wants to go fast, that wants to break things, and that wants to do cool, new, innovative things and learn from the best practices of Web 2. So decentralization of developers, lots going on there. And we do think this is going to be one of the major macro forces that is driving a lot of trends and change in the industry across the board in 2022. So from here, we're going to go a bit more tactical for the next 4. I think a good place to start is something that we're calling, this is playing out on social media right now, but we're seeing it across the board in a number of different kind of marketing channels and tactics. And this is what we're calling the importance of the individual. So kind of a really cool place to start looking at this, and kind of what our research team has started seeing in the market and dug into a bit more, plays out on Twitter. So you have these very high profile individuals. Elon Musk is a great example, who have these massive social media followings. Elon Musk, 76.1 million Twitter followers. But where the interesting nuance is when you start looking at these people compared to the companies that they own or run or work for. Tesla only has 13.4 million Twitter followers, making Elon Musk, a lot more influential in many ways than Tesla, which is pretty interesting as someone who's been doing a lot of marketing from the brand side in my career. It's quite interesting to see that. And as we look at a few more of these, we can look at Vitalik Buterin, the founder of Ethereum, at 3.4 million. We see this trend starting to form. Ethereum itself only has 2.2 million Twitter followers. And this goes kind of regardless of technology that you're looking at. You can go into the gaming space, for instance. Look at Hideo Kojima, who is, one of the most legendary game producers of all time, 3.1 million. And his production studio, Kojima Productions, only has 438,000. For anyone here who really likes to get into the numbers and really likes to get technical, Kojima Productions has an English and non-English Twitter handle, but even if you still aggregate those and put them together, that still only puts it at about 700,000. So just in case anyone really wanted to get into the numbers there and make a more accurate comparison, it's this really interesting trend that we're seeing. But what does this mean? What's the takeaway? How are we leveraging this in our approach to the market? And it really is this understanding of how social media and kind of networks are changing in general. For a very long time, social media strategy was focused on this idea of one-to-many. You have your brand channels, you focus on those. You use a very specific set of brand channels across Twitter, LinkedIn, Discord, whatever channels you're using. You have one strategy for that channel, put everything out and try and manage everything through that one central point. But what we're seeing is this shift to what we're calling few to many, where you're seeing, and it's not even these big celebrity figures. It's not even the Vitaliks or the Elon Musk. We're seeing product managers. We're seeing lead developers, head of development, head of creative on game studios, on development studios, on technologies, amassing these massive Twitter followings that follow them from company to company. And so now what we're seeing is we're calling this few to many approach, where we try and have a much more expansive approach to how we're engaging and reaching with the audience. And in recognizing that it's no longer this one-to-one relationship of a business talking to another business or a business talking to its customers, it's much more of this matrix is the word we've used. It's much more of a matrix of individuals chatting with each other. And there's two different effects from that. One is top down. It's important to realize that your marketing channels really extend far beyond just your corporate channels, and you have this really amazing chance to engage individuals, thought leaders, program managers, product leaders, developers within your company to leverage that in an integrated marketing strategy. And then you also have bottom up. It's really important to target individual developers. You're not just targeting a company when you go out on social or when you go out and you're doing marketing activations. You're targeting all these individual developers and all of these individual business decision makers at your target company so they can help champion your product and service up. We'll actually come back and talk about that a little bit more, I think, in the next section. So I won't give away too much there. But before we move on, I do want to touch on what I think is a really good example of this. So this is Sean Lee. He's the most recent CEO of the Algorand Foundation, which is in blockchain. And this is all social that is pulled from Sean's personal LinkedIn when he was the CEO. He did a really amazing job of having this kind of unique identity for his social that went a little bit further beyond what Algorand did on their corporate channels, but it still felt really integrated. He still worked a lot with the Algorand Foundation to make sure that there was all the kind of right branding and messaging and markup. And what it gave them was this very unified presentation in market. A lot of the messaging was the same. A lot of the takeaways were the same. So you were getting a lot of really good stuff from Algorand, from Sean. Really interesting approach, really cool stuff. So moving on, one of the most interesting things that we always talk about is customer journeys. We work with a lot of our clients on customer journeys. And for a long time, we've seen kind of what you've seen here. You see these two different approaches. Gartner has laid out what we call the B2B buying journey, which is very focused on a business persona. Then here we have DevRelBook that's done a very nice job laying out like this really detailed developer journey map. But we're seeing that that's not actually working as well in the real world as it does on a slides, because at the end of the day, you really have two audiences here that are integrated. There, no tech stack buying and purchasing decision in 2022 happens unless it's an incredibly small company. It doesn't happen with an interaction and engagement between these two audiences. So what we've started doing, and this is a really oversimplification of how it works, is we've started researching and working on integrated builder-buyer journeys, calling the buyer the non-technical persona that controls budget typically, and calling the builder the technical persona that's doing a lot of the research and validation. Obviously, that depends on what organization you're in, but that's generally how we look at it. And using them to identify shared touch points along the way. So what is their different levels of awareness? Acknowledging that. How do they come together to kick off and trigger a purchase decision. Then what does the research look like for that non-technical, the buyer persona? Where do they go? What questions are they asking? What is it and how is it different for the builder? What does their research look like? What does their prototyping look like? What does that feedback loop look like there? And then what are the conversations they have when they come together for selection and purchase? And what we found is by viewing this as a more holistic kind of integrated approach to buyer journeys and builder journeys is it lets you go out and create, again, more unified developer marketing programs that have a bit of a mix of both and allow you to have a shared consistent message, but that reaches the right audience at the right touch point at the right time. Really kind of cool approach that we've been using, something that I would recommend if you're not doing it already, definitely check it out and see where those overlapping sections are there. So as we get into the final two, one of the most interesting ones, and I'm sure this has been talked about quite a bit at the conference today, and this does flirt with the line of being a little bit of DevRel as well, is looking at some of the statistics of where developers are, where developer communities are, and how that's growing. And this is some data from the State of Developer Relations report. We've linked it in the deck by another organization. They do a phenomenal job. I would highly, the entire report is so well done. I would definitely recommend everyone check it out. But one of the most interesting things that's overlapped with some of our research as well is seeing Slack, as we know, sitting in the top 5 of most popular channels for developers, which is pretty cool in itself. But the really interesting nugget and what there's a little bit more data around in the report is Discord sitting at 13.8%. And that might not seem incredibly staggering, but what is interesting is Discord is year over year the biggest riser. It went from being just about 2% to 13.8%. And this is something, again, that we're seeing driven in these more forward-facing industries that move fast, like Web3, like metaverse, like gaming, all these industries. Discord is really becoming a B2B channel that's used a lot for developer marketing. For us, the question then becomes, why is this? And how is this something that we can leverage and our clients can leverage moving forward? And we really think that there's kind of a really simple explanation for why this happens and how to utilize the channel for best effectiveness. One, the desire for support and community. This is nothing new in developer marketing. Everyone here is not yet, yes, Gary, we get it. Developers want support, they want community. And Discord, Slack are very good ways to meet that, but it's the second 2 points. We think it meets that in a new way. The first is that speed of updates and response is instantaneous, right? It's very quick. You can reach out. There's always an active online community. You have a lot of the functionalities that you would typically see in a forum, with the ability to talk to the group as a whole, with the ability to consume announcements and news as they come out, but also with the ability to then carry on and continue to have these one-on-one conversations. And that in itself is something that happens very quickly on Slack and Discord, which is great. But that final thing that really differentiates it from a lot of different platforms is that it's niche and broad at the same time. And what I mean by this is that every Discord server or every Slack channel is niche. You can go as deep as you want or as broad as you want. You can be in a channel that's focused on JavaScript in general and go very broad, or you can go into something as niche as NFT development on the Algorand blockchain, with specific applications for gaming. You can go as deep as you want, but it's broad because it all exists on one platform. And so instead of a developer having to bounce around to all these, to Stack Overflow, to a forum on one page, to a forum on a different page, to a LinkedIn group, instead of a developer having to do that, they have the ability to have all of their broad and niche interests in one place with all the different servers and all these different channels, which is very consumer and developer friendly. And we're seeing that in the amount of uptake in these channels. The core takeaway here, if you're not using these yet, I would recommend you do. If you are using these, take a look at what some other brands are doing, especially in the gaming, especially in the blockchain and Web3 space. There's some really innovative uses of these channels for support, for DevRel, for marketing, for news and announcements that are worth taking a look at. And I know we're coming up on time, so we'll go relatively quickly through the last trend. And this is the death of corporate Memphis. So if we were all in a room together, I can only imagine there would be a collective groan in seeing kind of these very traditional, the flat, geometric, figurative characters that have kind of taken over the tech sector in the past decade. If you're not familiar, this aesthetic is called corporate Memphis, and it's become kind of the definitive style for big tech, for small startups, for nearly 10 years at this point. And we got here, there's really been this increased focus on apps and user interfaces in the last 10 years. And as such, there's been this big extension by brands into these online touch points to have a focus on utility of design. But what we're seeing is that the time of corporate Memphis, again, it's groan inducing. You see this and you're like, oh, it's another tech company. It's another platform. It's Synergy. It's buzzword, buzzword, buzzword. But we're seeing this really interesting pendulum swing into a total different direction, into the abstract, into the vibrant and the colorful. 3D characters, motion, and shapes have come together center stage. And the current state of branding in tech, and developer especially, feels, for what we would say the first time in a long time, very exciting. It feels bespoke and it feels bold, often flirting with the line between digital fine art, as our creative director, Cam Agnew, likes to say. He always puts things a bit more eloquently than I do as a creative, but that's why we have him here. And in previous cycles of design history, people were really beginning to understand that in order to stand out visually, you have to avoid slipping into the familiar, accessible, and the easy. And so whether it's in gaming or any other area of developer marketing, we're now seeing this great opportunity to be highly creative, highly visual, and exciting with your brand. Cosmos is another brand that we've seen using this movement into bold, iridescent 3D design, and especially using this for a lot of their hackathons, a lot of their developer activations. And it comes together in such a nice way. It feels visually appealing. It feels engaging, something that we've seen a lot of and something that we're trying to lean into quite a bit with our clients. So that was a lot for me. Went a little bit over time. Hopefully we still have a little bit of time for Q&A. These are our top 5 trends for developer marketing 2022. Again, big shout out to the Catchy team for all the work that went into this. And we'll hang tight and answer some questions for as long as they'll let us.
Right, Gary, thank you so much. That was really great, really, really insightful. So yeah, we've got a couple of minutes now, so we'll go through a couple of questions. First one is, what are the most important areas to invest into in the developer marketing space?
Yeah, in everything that we work on, and if you could only choose one, in our opinion, community, this ability to engage with your developers quickly, to give them support, to engage with them one-on-one or in this few to many approach is in my opinion, the most important place to invest. Whether you're going to do that on traditional community channels or try some new things like Slack and Discord, I think just having an integrated community strategy that really integrates with kind of the larger marketing approach you're taking is priority number 1 for a lot of the brands that we work with and a lot of the clients that we've seen kind of asking that same question.
Amazing. And do you think the popularity of Slack and Discord will continue to rise?
I do. We have a generation, we have millennials that grew up on Slack. We have a generation in Gen Z that are very used to this kind of peer-to-peer instantaneous communication. There's this whole thing called media generations theory, that like the prevalent technologies that emerge and stick around for the next decade are the ones that the current generations, the younger generations, are using now. So it is because of that proliferation of Discord and Slack usage in Gen Z that I'm very confident that these are only going to become more popular channels just in kind of like everyday working life.
Amazing. And what do you see becoming the number 1 channel, do you think?
Short term, video. Any YouTube, I think YouTube's only going to continue to grow, or anything that is video centric. In the long term, I think we're going to see much more of these kind of platform based experiences where you can go broad and also narrow at this. I guess I did those backwards, where you can go broad and narrow at the same time are going to kind of take the forefront, especially when they kind of integrate different forms of media, written content, video, editorial, all of that.
Amazing. No, thank you so much, and really, really enjoyed your session. Obviously, if the audience do want to connect with you, is there anywhere they can do so?
Yeah. LinkedIn, if you want to connect with me directly, LinkedIn/Gary X Gonzalez is the best place to do it. And of course, check out Catchy on the web at catchyagency.com.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Gary. Really enjoyed that, and speak to you soon.
Appreciate it. Take care, everyone.
Developer marketing. It's almost an oxymoron. Developers are known for hating marketing. But what if I told you that there are many types of marketing that developers not only tolerate, but actually love to engage with and rave about to their friends? Hi, my name is William Chia. I'm the Director of Product Marketing at Asano, and I'd like to tell you about my upcoming Product Marketing Alliance course and certification for developer marketing. I've been marketing developer tools for over a decade at companies like Twilio and GitLab, brands that are known for having great developer credibility. I'll share with you the fundamentals and the secrets of great developer marketing. In my course, you'll learn how to write copy that excites instead of alienates. You'll learn when a developer is not a developer. Here's a hint, it's more often than you think. We'll cover the complex and dizzying array of software personas, and we'll break it down into easy and digestible takeaways. We'll even answer questions like, do I need to learn to code? And how do I work across the organization to get everyone on the same page with developers? If you're new to marketing technical products and want to come up to speed as quickly as possible, or if you're a seasoned tech marketer and you really want to hone your craft, then check out my developer marketing course. Head over to certified.productmarketingalliance.com and look for developer marketing. For a limited time, you can get $100 off if you pre-order the course. Once you're developer marketing certified, you'll avoid the pitfalls that can turn off your customers and instead create marketing experiences that developers clamor for.
We hope you're enjoying the Developer Marketing Summit so far. Just before we jump into the next session, we are so excited to be launching the Developer Marketing Alliance as its own community. So keep your eyes peeled for the link to our new Slack community in the comments, where we'll be carrying on the discussion of all things developer marketing after the summit. Join to connect with peers, ask questions, get access to fresh content, hear about upcoming events like this one, and discover new opportunities. Also, don't forget you can re-watch these amazing sessions whenever you want with on-demand access. All you need to do is sign up for an Access All Areas Pass or PMA Pro membership. With a PMA Pro membership, you'll also get footage from past events, exclusive content, templates, frameworks to help you excel in your role, plus so much more. But for now, back to the Developer Marketing Summit.
welcome to everybody who's joining us today online for the Developer Marketing Summit. I'm really excited to be joining for the second summit ever that we're having online, and I'm delighted to be joined by 3 other experts in the field of developer marketing and developer relations. And we'd like to share with you some of our best wisdom, knowledge, tips and tricks, and hacks for a really productive, collaborative approach between developer marketing and developer advocates or relations. So I want to get the ball rolling here. And so I'll introduce myself. So my name is Arabella David, and I've been doing developer relations for a pretty healthy amount of time. So I've been with some startups and also some companies like Salesforce, Google, Microsoft, and a little company that used to make phones called Nokia, which is where I got my start. And I've always been passionate about developers, just because in marketing especially, they'll tell you what they want. And they're really explicit on what they need in order to be successful. So I'll pass the ball over to Ben with his little kitty cat, and he can give an introduction of himself and why he loves developer marketing and developer relations.
Yeah, so I'm Ben Lloyd Pearson. I run developer marketing at Mattermost. My background has kind of jumped back and forth between engineering and marketing. Most of it has been centered around open source technology. I got into this field because, honestly, when I got into software development many years ago, and it was one of the most empowering things I ever experienced in my life. I've loved being able to take some of the more creative and communication skills I have and apply it to this field that I find really interesting. So.
Great. Sherry, you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Cherry Monroe. I'm the Vice President of Developer Experience at DocuSign. And so that covers several teams, including developer relations, developer marketing, and a few other functions. I've been in this space for about a decade, and in various functions. I've done the marketing function, some of the other pieces within DevRel. And I'm excited to just be chatting with you guys on this topic. I love the developer space. I think engaging and enabling technical audiences who are builders and creators. There's just so much creativity and excitement and kind of what comes out of those engagements. Career-wise, I would say, it's really fun to be working at the intersection of, product, engineering, and marketing. So, no day is the same, and it's a really fun space.
Wonderful. Thank you, Cherry. And then Ricardo, you want to finish off the introductions?
Sure. Hey, everyone. I'm Ricardo, and I'm head of developer relations and community at Marqeta. I've been in DevRel for about 8 years, and like many of us, stumbled into this career. I actually started off my professional career as a reporter, did that for a few years. And when I decided to switch over into tech, I really wanted to land a marketing gig, just because the skill sets that you get in reporting are very similar in marketing. Got the first job that I could in SF, this small developer relations agency. And little did I know how much marketing I was going to be exposed to throughout all the different roles that I've held. I absolutely love that about developer relations, is that we kind of get to redefine how this traditional, well-known, established industry works for our individual users. And that's pretty exciting. And I think that, we'll all discuss various insights and opinions, but, for each one of us, it works. And I think that's the fun in it. I'm excited.
It is super exciting. And it sounds like your skills in journalism are really, really serving you well, and would serve all of us very well in our area of marketing and really understanding our audience. So I'm glad that you're able to join us here and the audience here today. I think between us all, we can easily clock more than 50 years of experience cumulatively. And I think that's so exciting. And so whether you're new to the area of developer marketing relations, or if you've been around as long as we have I think we're kind of the grizzled veterans at this point. We're hoping that you could pick up a tip or two in order to be more successful in your initiatives. So I'll start this panel by saying that earlier this week, we had a discussion, the four of us. And Ben, I think it was you wanted to have a question in there that was, do developers hate marketing? So I want to kick off that discussion because I just wanted to I had opinions, but I'll let you share your opinion first and then we can just get into it.
Yeah, your typical developer, they're on a mission, and it's usually to solve a very specific problem. You need to meet them where they are on their journey and provide tools and resources that help them. So, I've always had this opinion that all technical content that you generate should feed into your persuasive narratives, whether that's a website page, blog post, documentation, SDKs, code examples, tooling, whatever it is. Developers are going to dive super deep into everything when they're investigating their problem. So if you save them time, if you provide a useful tool, if you educate them, they'll just naturally grow to appreciate you. And I think discussions like this are happening more and more because we're all sort of collectively realizing that we really need this more holistic approach to market to developers. Marketing doesn't necessarily need to own every single one of those technical content pieces that I was describing, but they do have a major stake in making sure that it's successful. And I think it's doing things like educating rather than pitching, not blocking important information behind requests for personal information, avoiding spamming with irrelevant information. Like if you do all these things, I think developers actually will love you and grow to embrace you more than just accept you.
Ricardo, Cherry, any other thoughts here?
Yeah, so
go ahead, Ricardo.
Oh, okay. I was just gonna say the question, do developers hate marketing? Does anybody love marketing? Does anybody love to know they're being marketed towards? I don't think that anyone does. I think developers don't like bad marketing when it's aimed at them. And I think if you can leave with something today, it's if you're going to do some marketing campaigns and you're just not quite sure the copy that you're using, the creative that you're using, and you're not an engineer or developer background yourself, just Slack one of your engineers and say, hey, does this make sense? Do you understand this? What do you think about this? Because it's happened to me many times where they're like, I have no idea what this is. And I have to change things so that I'm really being intentional with the communication that I'm putting out there. All communication that we're sending to developers is some sort of marketing. And so we just have to be a little bit more aware of this persona versus just your traditional marketing teams who can kind of blanket their marketing campaigns per segment and not think about technical audiences. So that's how I think about it. I mean, I've seen very successful marketing campaigns that developers love, and it's just because it was the right tone, directed to and intended for developers.
Are there examples that you can think of?
Yeah, so there was recently we launched our developer community, and this was kind of the first time that we had a launch for our developer audience. And so we created different code snippets within GIFs and animations, kind of teasing the launch. And within the laptop, there was different code, and you can if you were a developer, you can kind of decipher what it was that we were saying. But if you weren't a developer, then you were like, what is this? And so that was intentional. We wanted to make sure that developers knew we were communicating to them and that this was specific for them. I think, in terms of last year, that was those teaser and launch animations were one of the highest engaged social media assets that we had. And that was really exciting to see.
Yeah. So it sounds like, to summarize, developers don't like crappy marketing, but they do want good content. So if we just have good content marketing, and I think that aligns with what both you, Ricardo, and Ben are saying, then it'll be very successful and wonderful for everyone involved. Sherry, did you, I know both of you answered at the same time, so I'll give you all the space to answer.
Yeah, sure. No, I think you both touched on it kind of perfectly. It's not, I think the marketing tactics that a traditional marketing team uses, they still work with developers. It is all around that message and really kind of being honest, being clear, and being useful, right? And really narrowing in. It's almost like you're writing technical docs where you're really getting right to the point and you're kind of bypassing all that marketing fluff and really getting to what's useful for the developer. But yeah, it's really about that message.
Yeah, for sure. And to finish it off, I realized I didn't actually share what I'm doing today. So what I'm doing today is I'm building a developer relations team, an initiative for a company called WhatsApp. And I think it's very interesting to hear your perspectives. And I think an underrated aspect of developer marketing, and one of the reasons we all bring so much value to the companies we work with, is that we're able to put our ears to the ground and really understand developers and really carve out the space and time to deeply understand who they are, what they're defined as, share that within the company, and also advocate for what they need from a marketing perspective. So that is a great kind of introduction and way to justify our roles, right? As developer marketing people in our companies. So I think that brings us to our next question. Like, we're all in different sizes of companies, and the viewers that are kind of watching this panel are all coming from a huge range of sizes of companies, specialties, what they're doing. I'd love for us all to understand kind of how does developer marketing and developer relations or advocacy show up in your organization? And how does that affect your level of effectiveness or impact in your company? So Cherry, I'll let you go first because you were the last one to go last time.
Yeah, sure. So within DocuSign is a pretty big company now. We're at maybe north of 7,000, 8,000 employees. And so, this team lives within the product and engineering organization. And as I mentioned, I've got a few different teams under kind of this developer experience kind of umbrella. So developer marketing is kind of one function. The developer relations piece is another function. We also have kind of an ISV focus as well. It's not necessarily relations, but we want to ensure that ISV developers, they have kind of a nuance in the way that they build based on, they're kind of monetizing their integration and going to market with it. And so the way they build authentication workflows and the way they structure it is slightly different. So we kind of have an ISV focus as well. And so all of this kind of lives within product and engineering, and our marketing organization is separate. And so a lot of the time our marketing teams, will work with our corporate marketing teams and kind of leverage the same tech stack, we want to use the same, webinar tools. We want to use the same, we don't want to compete on our paid search kind of campaigns. And so we want to work in harmony with them. But the function itself, developer marketing, and that expertise on developer resides within the product and engineering organization.
So is that optimal for you? I mean, I don't want you talking trash about your employer, but do you think you're very effective where you are?
Today, we are effective where we are, but that's not to say that having the ability to scale with our broader marketing organization and have them really bought in on the developer piece and having them activate on developer would give us a tremendous amount of scale and a tremendous amount of growth. Right now, it does feel a little bit like it's something that we're forcing on, or we're pushing from one angle. And so I think that it's worked for us as an organization, like from startup to here, it has worked for us. And as we kind of evolve as a company, I think there's exploration on like how do we ensure that all of marketing thinks about this persona and this audience and really ensures that it shows up everywhere in everything that we do.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think I want to flip this entirely over to Ben, because I think we have a quite different corporate configuration for you and your team.
Yeah, so all of our DevRel falls underneath developer marketing at our company. And we kind of view our primary goals. There's like three things that I'm focusing on: awareness, engagement, nurturing. So finding new audiences, attracting them to our ecosystem, engaging them with content that resonates with them, and then nurturing them to deepen that involvement, whether it's, we have open source projects they can become involved with. They can become a user of our free products, or they can become a paying customer. And the biggest benefit I get from being on the marketing side is we have a pretty mature marketing organization that freely grants me access to all of the support that you would typically get. So, we have wonderful designers that help me produce super attractive visual elements that, it definitely does help improve engagement with content that we publish. We have a content management team that handles all of the content strategy and publication process and copy editing. Our growth marketing supports us with paid advertising. We advertise community events, we advertise developer content, and we also have quite a few pretty successful email program as well. And then, data operations, we get to, we have very good tracking of everyone who comes into our ecosystem, whether it's a website visitor or a contributor to one of our open source projects or user of our product. We have very mature data tracking. And then, of course, product marketing helps me craft messaging that we sort of inject into every piece of technical content that we do. I'm constantly referring to the strategic messaging docs that they've produced, because it just really helps me communicate, make that connection between the developer audience and where the traditional purchasing center might be within an organization. So this is it's honestly it's been a wonderful place to be, to really illustrate the value of doing all of these things right, because we have a pretty strong understanding of our entire marketing funnel from top to bottom. So we know, most of the activities that my team engages with really affects the top and middle of funnel. And we know we have a direct correlation between the work that's happening up there and the bottom line growth that we see at the company. So it's put me in a place that has made it really easy for me to communicate the value of this to our executive leadership.
That sounds wonderful. And I think that's a situation, especially because developer marketing and developer relations is kind of a new-ish field. I'd say it's only really kind of come into its own in the last 10 years or so. I think where you're at is more the exception than the rule, but it is aspirational. We all want to get there eventually. So Ricardo, now that we've had kind of like the two extremes of how they are sitting, where is your where's your placement in your organization?
I was literally, when Ben was talking, I was like, geez, this is goals. So I actually was brought on into the marketing organization to build the function of developer relations. So the CMO, Vidya Peters, she used to be at MuleSoft. She used to own, they have an awesome developer relations function there. And so she knew the value of having this for an organization like ours, and prioritize having that. And the reason why I bring that up is it's important to have an executive sponsor wherever you are. It's important that you know who is going to back you up when it comes to resources and budget. And that was actually really important for me to understand before I joined Marqeta. Initially, my role was just to focus on community, but as a DevRel professional, I understood that there's a lot more that kind of comes into play than just a community. So I drafted up a team function that actually has developer relations overarching as the team, and then within that is developer marketing as a discipline. And developer education, success, all those different aspects are part of developer relations. So that's how we're broken down right now. In terms of the impact, I think it's kind of the opposite from what Cherry described in her situation. So I have to be really careful to always connect with product, like day to day, with the developer experience team, because they're the ones that DevRel kind of revolves around. At my previous role, I was in the product side and I worked with marketing, so I kind of knew what that was like. But here it's like marketing gets so wrapped up sometimes on, just pushing stuff out. And then I kind of have to like go and double check with the product is, hey, is this ready? Are we good with this timeline? Are you going to be able to deliver? And so it's a lot easier to be aware of those timelines or the product roadmap when you're in product, whereas in marketing, it isn't. So it's kind of the opposite, and it has its challenges, but it's all part of the fun.
Definite +1 to the executive sponsorship. I think that's beyond just developer marketing to just being successful in corporate life, period. But also I am noticing that both you, Ben, Ricardo, and Cherry, you all mentioned this kind of relationship that we have both with product. And I think that's not something to be understated. So one thing I've been seeing in my previous roles is as developer marketing, your closest colleagues when it comes to a lot of the day-to-day are people like product managers and product marketing managers. And they all have slightly different roles, but they're all trying to move towards the same objective. So a lot of the times too, these product managers and product marketing managers have never worked with developer marketers before. So there's a lot of education that needs to get done internally, especially as I mentioned before, this is a newish field. So that kind of brings me to my next question for you. And so I think I want to bring this to you, Ben, because you had mentioned this before about showing impact. And you probably have a couple of really good examples of this at hand. Can you share with us and the people watching this panel, what has been the impact that you've seen between a close collaboration between developer marketing and I'm going to call it developer relations, but I can also just say product marketing or whatever helps kind of like prove the value up to your sponsors or across the company?
Yeah. So since we have such a strong such a strong sense for our marketing funnel, I can literally tie what this is going to provide to us at the bottom line. And of course, every content piece doesn't perform the same, so it's not always what percentage for us. So obviously, being in marketing, most of my focus is around things like digital content, experiential activations, using our things. So we're constantly tracking so target audience. There's probably no other team at our company that is better equipped to aware of our product or our ecosystem. And then internally, we do a lot of things to track content engagement, monitor. We can't do this at scale, but we monitor things like site path navigation to see how many people fill out a contact sales form, But then we can also do things like referral from developer resources. So I've published like technical demo apps in the past. And within those apps, we had referral links to specific areas in our documentation. And I could actually count the number of developers who were using those links to come to our website. And then, of course, we also have an open source community. So there's a lot of metrics we can also track with that. But that's kind of that's a whole rabbit hole in itself. So I don't want to dive into that one too much. But, I think within marketing, if you have a really mature marketing organization, it's actually very easy to put like a bottom line value on the work that we're providing.
Yeah, your integrated marketing game is locked down. So props to you. I want to bring it to you, Cherry, because you had mentioned before in a previous conversation about sales folks and how they were getting and how they were chatting with developers. Share a little bit about your experiences with the impact and how you're making things distinct.
Sure. Yeah, I can speak to that. I think the impact, I think the impact that I think about, as kind of Ben alluded to with DevRel, is really that top of the funnel content creation, driving awareness. And for us, really, we see that, building trust and credibility, and to build trust and credibility with developers, you've got to really create content that's solid and solve kind of the developers kind of use case or their need. And so we do a ton in terms of like top of the funnel content creation. And then I see really the developer marketing team as this group who is tracking developers kind of through a funnel. And for us at DocuSign, we actually see a significant amount of, bottoms up purchasing. So we see developers start a trial kick the tires, build a proof of concept, and we've kind of trained a dedicated sales team on how to engage with the developers as they're building a proof of concept. Like, don't sell them, don't call them, but maybe give them some resources, give them some links to things that might be helpful, and if they hit a roadblock, connect them with someone in kind of our developer support organization to kind of answer their question and kind of get them over that hump. And so we've seen we see the revenue impact in this bottoms up selling motion. But I would say more broadly, I think we look at, we're looking at usage and adoption as kind of that ultimate metric, is how many new integrations are being built, how much traffic of our transactional volume in a given month is sent via developer built integrations. So it's a strong metric for us, and it's the primary one that we kind of focus on.
Wow, that sounds like the takeaway here is make sure your product instrumentation is locked down before you do any marketing.
How to prove value. I really sometimes struggle being within the marketing organization. How does that make my developer relations function valuable? Like, what makes that unique? How does that make us, impactful, right? When it comes to budget cuts or, headcount allocation, like, I want to make sure that I'm communicating and reporting metrics that are unique to this new, to Sandbox, time to dashboard, and but what really is impactful and what has been impactful is to show, so we're making their lives a lot easier through all these content pieces. And that is where we're showing the value of developer relations and why it's important that we have this specific focus, right? I think that's very important, especially for new DevRel teams out there, is to try to at least identify metrics and KPIs that no other team is tracking or is able to do, because then you're going to be able to stand out. And I should have started with, because I know some of you, very new to the industry. Before you go out and you take what each of us said and you start writing down your KPIs, you first need to figure out like your company goals, the way your team is structured, the maturity level of your program. All of that stuff really does influence what exactly is valuable and what's going to be the most impactful. That is such important legwork to do, and then you can figure out the rest. So just make sure you do that first, and then you can come back to the recording and listen to this question again.
That's actually a giant +1. So one thing I have noticed as I've been doing developer relations in various companies is that there's an assumed definition of who the developers are. And that really needs to be unpacked 1000% within your first 30 days on the job. So I think that's kind of the key to success, because there's a lot of assumptions, right? So like some people have kind of, I think today it's the outmoded view of the developer kind of sitting there with a Red Bull and a slice of pizza. But I think in today's modern time, that's kind of outdated. It's much more sophisticated now. And in this world of like DEI, diversity, equality, and inclusion, that's just not cool. Like we have to do a lot more work kind of defining who these developers are, especially as some of our companies are more kind of business oriented. What does developer mean in a business context? If we're targeting startups, like Cherry had mentioned before in a previous chat, like what does that mean? So I think that brings us to like, what's really important is setting up your persona set and your segmentation and getting buy-in across the company before triggering off any marketing activity. But I think that brings us to, and I want to start with you, Ricardo, for this one. This brings us to, it seems like since you're kind of fresher in this area and you're starting a bit anew compared to a lot of us, what are your thoughts in regards to establishing branding for developers? Do you want to share some thoughts on your learnings and your strategies regarding that?
Yeah, it is definitely a nice to have, a plus. So do not feel pressured that you need to focus on developer branding. However, developer branding is just that little oomph, that unique set of assets that is just specific to them, they'll feel special, right? And you'll start to create this sense of community, this sense of just developer first communication. And so I first experienced this back at Visa when I was brought on to launch the Visa developer community and DevRel program. I worked really closely with the product marketing team to create a developer voice playbook. And so, I mean, it was Visa. And so it was really just by the book guidelines. Is exactly how you're supposed to communicate with developers. Very, very, all the rules. However, I mean, that's one extreme. However, it kind of like, I was like, oh, this is interesting. Cause like we're providing guidance to all our sales folks, all our marketing folks, all our product folks that like have never really communicated to developers. And now they can go to this playbook and see like how they should phrase things, what they should say, what text they should use, all those things. And it was pretty impactful. And that just kind of spun out several initiatives for us to create like a developer creative look, tone, feel. We worked with agencies to just create this different type of experience, still using the Visa brand, but specific for developers. And the first few months, it was just assets. But after a few months, after maybe like 6 months, developers started to email and say, hey, like, this is pretty cool that Visa is doing this. Oh, like, who would have thought that Visa was gonna, focus on the developer audience. And so I took those learnings and I, here at Marqeta, and, I have this awesome creative team who has just been super pumped to help kind of bring this to life. And we've been testing things here and there. And you can kind of see like some of the assets when we're talking about developer events are slightly different. They're still within the brand, but you can tell that it's meant for the developer audience. And it's also something fun to do, right? And I think that's where that collaboration with marketing and DevRel is super powerful.
Super side question. And I just want to spring this on all of you. Thank you for that, Ricardo, but this thought just popped into my head. In this endemic world of COVID, what are your all thoughts on swag for developers?
Oh my goodness. So I almost wore my my Marqeta swag. We actually created a developer little logo, which is awesome. But it's really tough, honestly. Like I don't want to bombard developers with more t-shirts. I've like banned t-shirts from our swag just because like no more t-shirts. But like it's just like, how can we get creative? They've probably received so much swag by now. So it's difficult. So I'm actually spending a lot less on swag than I did pre-pandemic, because now I'm just thinking twice before sending it, because I don't want to like waste anything,
Especially with the Postal Service in the United States being the state it's in right now, right? So, Cherry, do you have any thoughts on swag?
Yeah. I'll touch first on the brand piece, because we did the same thing at DocuSign, and we want, we're a big corporation. We have a very kind of like strict brand guideline, and we wanted to do the same thing that kind of Ricardo talked about. We wanted to have a little bit more leeway and variety in the way that we talk to developers and the way that we show up. And so, our brand team, this was maybe a couple of years ago, was reluctant. And then we had kind of a new person come in who was jazzed, and they were so excited. This was the funnest thing that they got to do. And so they got to really play and get creative and take the brand in a slightly different direction, a little bit more playful and colorful. And so if you check us out, DocuSign API on Twitter or kind of any of our social handles, you'll kind of see a little bit of that flavoring and coloring and the objects that we kind of get to play with. But I think another part of that was, also kind of coming up with like a tagline and this like voice and tone and really empowering builders. And so we kind of landed on architects of the agreement cloud. And so, DocuSign's moving from sign to kind of broader agreement solutions, and just kind of like acknowledging that these are the builders, these are the architects, these are the people who can take this to the next level, and with their creativity can build whatever they think the agreement cloud needs to be. it was just a fun exercise. And I think it keeps our content, our videos, our social feed, it keeps it fresh. It really is kind of like this important thing. And I'm on the same bandwagon with swag. We're struggling. I want to do more with swag but we're struggling. And I think some of the stuff is getting stale, and we kind of want another refresh as well.
Yeah, same thing. Like no t-shirts, no baseball hats. Like who wants, especially who wants boxes and boxes of all this stuff, especially hauling them around to events. Am I right? Oh wait, we don't do events anymore because of COVID.
let me cancel my developer swag baseball hat that I was sending to you, Arabella.
No. So Ben, you probably have like boxes and boxes of swag because your team's so mature, right?
Yeah, well, our company does actually have a huge history of sending out tons of swag, but we actually just recently adopted some new policies around that. So for every promotion where we offer swag now, with some exceptions, we also offer alternatives for either sometimes it's a gift card, sometimes it's a donation to some sort of like nonprofit that developers might care about, or something that I really encourage today is to find out what open source projects your company depends on, and start sponsoring them. Like many of them now are on places like GitHub Sponsors, on I think it's called Open Collective. There's quite a few sites now where these projects have collected, and many of them are very open about needing like financial support. You know, we have projects that like literally like billions of dollars worth of product and infrastructure relies on around the world that are being run by one or two people in their free time, you know. And so I definitely encourage like adopt that as like a swag policy. You know, you can always like some people do want the physical items, you know, because not everyone gets opportunities to get them as frequently as like marketers do, you know. But at the same time, you know, I think there's ways we can still give people incentives without you know, forcing one model onto them. Yeah.
I love that. That's so great. Like I love that because it really keys into, I think, one thing that's very unique to developers, which is an inclination to give back. And it's very community minded. And I'm going to speak very broadly after I just said that there's a lot of segments, but I think as a whole, developers love to help each other learn and give back. And that open source angle and supporting the causes that developers love is amazing. And so I would love actually if you could post more details about that later.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah. And just as a final note on swag, I am on the anti-swag bandwagon, mainly because every time I've done it, I've turned into a retail store, just like shipping things everywhere. And I'm like, wait, this isn't my job. What's going on here? So I think one thing I wanted to chat about and set aside some time to really go over is as developer relations and developer marketing is kind of in its awkward teenage stage as an industry, as a field, right? So like we're kind of like been around for a while, there's people jumping into the industry, and we're having like variants of people in maybe they're developer advocates, which is distinct from developer marketing. I'm seeing like developer content specialists as well that are emerging. As you're all building your team and as you're all like maturing what you're doing already, how do you know when someone is good at developer marketing or developer relations? I know, Cherry, you're growing your team, so I want you to answer this one first.
Right, yeah, I'm looking for a head of developer relations. And so I think, you know, there's so much, right? There's so many different areas that DevRel and dev marketing touches. You're not going to find a person who is going to be great at every single thing and be technical and charismatic and content and X, Y, and Z. And so you really need to, you really do need to kind of focus in on what's that gap that you're trying to fill. And for us, like the maturity level of our program, you know, or your program, you know, you need to think about that maturity level and say, hey, like if there's one thing I can do that will be impactful, it's this thing, and I want to hire for that. But for the position that I have today, head of DevRel, you know, the way I'm positioning that is I'm looking for someone who will, you know, eventually manage a team of both developer evangelists who are kind of out there and communicating and doing a ton of events and meetups and writing code and on Stack and on Git. And so someone who can manage a team of evangelists as well as advocates. And so I kind of bucket evangelists and advocates under that DevRel umbrella. And the advocate piece is really like, not only do I want to communicate with developers out in the community, but I want to be able to bring them and fold them into an experience, a set of programs, and some type of engagement with us so that we're really building a community and we're taking that voice of that developer and bringing it back into the roadmap and ensuring that we're building. And so for me right now, I'm looking for kind of this overarching kind of leader who can build out what will be kind of the full DevRel function.
Wow. Okay. So you're looking for the head of, you're also looking for advocates, for evangelists, program managers,
Yes.
Scaled growth initiatives. You're looking for the whole package. So hopefully this is, so just to reiterate, DocuSign's hiring. Sherry seems awesome. Give her a
drop me a line.
So I think on that one, what Ricardo, Ben, I don't know who wants to go first, but what, as you're hiring or when you're interacting with others in the field, what really jumps out? What really like is a green flag? Like, oh, this person is a great person to work with.
Sure. And I think I'm basically following the same approach that Terry just walked us through. And I'm hiring for a developer advocate, and that's just, well, if I had the choice, I would be hiring for a lot more, but we all know that you gotta be patient with headcount. But I'm hiring for a developer advocate, and the reason why is because I looked at like what was super successful last year, and it was all the content that we put out. It was all the tutorials and webinars that we did, that I did, and with help with an agency and internal, but it takes up so much of my time, and I still got to focus on the strategy and building this out even further. And so I know that I need somebody who's just going to be that advocate, building content, building tutorials, getting started guides, and going to events and speaking on behalf of Marqeta developer. And so that is how I prioritize like what is the role that I want right now. And in terms of like what qualities, obviously, just have that empathy with developers, understand the developer journey, understand some pain points, and be charismatic, right? Especially for a developer advocate, I want to feel comfortable with them going and speaking at events, speaking with developers, whether it's in person or virtual. So it's basically the things that I'm not maybe the strongest in, like a technical advocate, right? Because my background is not in developer, so I understand that that's where the gap exists, and so that's kind of where I'm looking to hire first.
Okay, so if you're watching and you're looking for a job, talk to Ricardo and Sherry. Ben, are you also hiring?
I actually just finished hiring, so I'm in a different situation. But when I evaluate people for DevRel positions, I think there's kind of 4 buckets that people will fall somewhere. Like it's kind of like a Venn diagram, and that is education skills, communication skills, technical, and community. Great candidates, in my experience, are usually, they excel in like probably 2 of those. They're kind of like average in one of them, and then the 4th one they may have little to no experience. So it's just a matter of looking at whatever the projects are, the initiatives that they're going to be involved with. Like, does the profile of that candidate fit the need you have within those?
I'm going to mix your metaphors now more. So in addition to Venn diagrams and buckets, can I call them legs? So they'll be 4 legs. So I think that's a great kind of quick scan as folks are kind of like looking at their resumes or CVs, or on the hiring side as they're checking things. It's a really nice kind of rubric to go through. Just to polish this particular thread off, I am also hiring. So if people are looking for roles in the developer relations field, I'm growing my team as well. So hit me up. I don't use Twitter that much. I kind of looked at LinkedIn once in a blue moon. Maybe I should do it more now that I said I'm hiring, but okay. So as we polish off, I know that we're running close to time, if not over, but I want to kind of leave the viewers with like something exciting that you're looking forwards to in the world of developer relations and developer marketing. And Ricardo, you want to kick us off on this final question?
Sure. I mean, I kind of alluded to it earlier, but we are basically defining how this industry plays out and what it looks like tomorrow. And I've learned so much over the past 8 years, over the past year during this conversation, and there is so much to learn. So that is what's super exciting to me, that it's not just a defined industry from a textbook, but we kind of get to figure it out as we go along. And when you have those successes are just that much sweeter because, hey, nobody else has tried this out and you were the first one. And I think that's what I'm really looking forward to, having a lot more of those.
Love it. Scrappiness at scale.
Yeah.
All right, Ben.
Yeah, I'm excited about the normalization of marketing as like a critical component of DevRel success. And the recognition that the practices of the past don't really work on this audience. So, I think we'll see more marketing teams learn how to embrace DevRel and make it a part of their, like a central component of their strategic success. And I'm also just loving how marketing teams are increasingly focusing more on education and enablement over sales attempts. And I think events like this are a huge benefit to that. So more of this.
Oh, great. Yeah, that's a note. Hey, organizers, we should have more of these events. Cherry?
Yeah, for me, at a really like macro level, I think that it's exciting to see that, developers have taken on more authority, not just like influencing budget decisions, but actually, deciding how money gets spent in their organization. And so I think this shift and empowerment of developers is really powerful, and we're going to see more and more. To both Ricardo and Ben's point, there's just going to be more emphasis on how you market, how do you talk, how do you make it easier for developers to do what they're doing. And so we're starting to just see just more traction, and I think it's just exciting as this audience gets more powerful. The solutions around it and how we talk to them, how we market to them, is going to evolve.
So I agree with you 1,000%. I mean, seeing the innovation that's coming out from this field, like especially globally, right? Someone in a region that isn't typically known for being, say, Silicon Valley, kind of comes out of nowhere with the next world-changing invention app. Like, I want to be a part of, I want to help those people be successful. And if that's by raising awareness of like this location API or this messaging API, I'm doing what I can. So it's all about the world forward, right? So thank you all for taking the time to have a chat with me today about the world of developer marketing and how we collaborate with developer relations. I'm hoping that folks who take the time to also check us out and hear what we have to say can pick up something that they can apply to their daily lives. And hopefully we can all have a chance to chat on similar topics, offline or online. So I want to thank you again, and have a good day, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.